How y'all doing today? You guys doing good? Let us know in the chat. Just gonna adjust my volume a little bit. Awesome. Cool. I'm gonna get going. If the number keeps climbing up with everybody in here, we'll kind of pause before we get into the meat of things. But we also have a lot to cover, so might as well start on time. So glad to have everybody here today. First thing I actually want to know, hear from a good of you that people are doing good, staying healthy, is just where are you today? Let me know. Let me know if you can see and hear me. Obviously, you can. You should be able to see a slide and hear my voice. Um, and let us know where you are. Columbus, Ohio. Good to have you here. Vermont, the whole state. Niagara, Canada. No, I'm kidding. But it's not that big of a state. No. Niagara, Canada. South Africa, Luke. Awesome to have you here. Delaware. Awesome. Very cool. And yeah, we're getting some more attendees right now, which is great. So we'll just hang out here for like a minute. Make sure we're good. Awesome. Bunch of South African people. Moscow, Frankfurt. It's going by pretty quick. Am I David Henry? Yes, in fact, I am. We'll go over that in a second. The one and only, whether you wanted him here or not, here I am. Texas. Awesome, guys. Great. Very cool. Awesome. We're getting some more people coming in. Oh, look, there is Chuck Dillingham, a product rep for many things, or it's an imposter, and I've just given him control. One of the two. Um, Italy, awesome. And I saw, Simone, and I saw Giancarlo here as well, I believe. And so he's in Italy too. Maybe you guys are friends, maybe not. Awesome. We got some more people coming in. That is just wonderful. Chuck says hi. Either it's real Chuck or an imposter. I didn't check. We assume it's real Chuck. Very cool. Awesome. Yeah, numbers still climbing up a little bit. So glad things are well for most people here. Obviously, we're all stuck inside, but that doesn't mean we can't learn. We can't enjoy learning a new skill, learn new things, and become better at what we do. It's good to do that every day. And we're going to do that with an introduction to Onyx today. So how will today's webinar work? That's a great question. And so we're here in Zoom today for this webinar. And so you've got the main window where you can see my slide right now. And we're going to be going into Onyx within that window later on today. Now, Chuck's got bigger priorities, I guess, now. But so you've got that main window. There's also a chat and a Q&A section, okay? And both of these are important. The chat is where you can talk to people, where Chuck can tell us about his excuses. No, not really. It's all good, man. And the Q&A, though, is if you have questions during the webinar, place them there. If you're replying or saying thank you for answering your question, don't worry about putting it in the Q&A. But use that question and answer, that Q&A section, for questions as we go through today's webinar, because unlike the chat, when people are getting chatting, we have a lot of people, your questions will get lost in there. But in the Q&A section, they don't get lost. In fact, it's beautiful. They stick around until us, the panelists, here today, myself, David Henry, who will be teaching. We have Matthias Henriks here, and Chuck Dillingham will be here at his convenience. He says he's got other priorities. No, it's all good, man. I'm just giving you a hard time. So 2 of us from Nashville, 1 in Minneapolis. Happy to be here answering questions and teaching you guys today. Now, as we get into things, guys, if you could do me a huge favor. This is going to be a pretty good size webinar. We go for about 3 hours on these, and we'll go until I almost said 3 p.m. in my time zone. It is not. It's 2 p.m. because we're an hour earlier this week. And if you could, for me, just set this full screen, if you can, on a separate device from Onyx, if you got that ability. If not, that's okay. And remove any distractions you've got. So turn your phone on silent like I have. That's a huge help. Just so that you can focus on today's webinar, because if sometimes people ask questions about things that we already completely covered, and if that happens, we may get to them, we may go over them again, but it's not going to be a priority if it's something we already covered and you missed it. Of course, we want this to be as educational, informative, and helpful to all of you as it can be, and the best way to do that is if you're paying attention. Now, what are we going to cover today? Well, we're going to cover the very basics of Onyx hardware. We're going to talk briefly about the Onyx hardware range, what the different options are, just so you're familiar with that. Then we're going to talk about the Onyx software. Now, that's going to be the bulk of our webinar. And so we'll get there in a second. Our goal today is to get you off to a running start. Now, this is a little phrase I've coined for webinars like this, where it's just to say that if you've never been in Onyx before, by the end of today, I want you to be able to record your first presets, your first groups rather, presets and cues and effects, and be able to start playing around in the software where you're not stuck paying attention to someone teaching. You're like, oh, I kind of know what to do. I can play around. I can start to learn things. And then last, we'll show you where to get help, because you will probably have follow-up questions as you get deeper into it and think of, oh, how could I do this? How could I do that? We'll show you where to get that stuff at the end of today's webinar. Now, who are we talking to today? As I mentioned, guys, I'm David Henry from Learn Stage Lighting teaching today, and Matthias is here as well. He's under the name Elation Professional in the chat. And then Chuck Dillingham is one of the product reps for Elation, among other things, and he's going to be in the chat too. And he's also in Tennessee with me. So, Onyx hardware. Let's talk about that first. And so, what we can see here on our screen is just a simple screen capture from the Onyx, the Obsidian website. But what I want to know is what Onyx hardware do you usually use? Let us know in the chat. I would love to see that, just so we have an idea today of who we're talking to, what hardware you're on. Though throughout the webinar, I'll mention things that apply to hardware, things that apply to PC, and both. So let me know in the chat what hardware you're using. Awesome. We get somebody on M6, NX2 and Wings, M2Go, M Touches. Awesome. Good deal. Broken Wing was able to fix it. Awesome. PC only, M Touch, M6. Cool. Awesome, guys. Lots of good stuff here. So as we can see from the range here, there's a whole range of hardware options, which is really great, because one of the things that I really like about Onyx is that no matter what level of console you're looking to purchase, what amount of cash you got, etc., there's something in your price range, whether you're just starting or whether you need a full-fledged console. And so here at the bottom, we've got these two PC wings here, actually 3 items that are PC items here. We've got the Onyx key, which simply unlocks the software fully, full amount of 128 universes, patchable between 0 and 255. We've got the NXDMX, which is going to give you 2 universes of output, but is not a software unlock, so be aware of that. We have the NX Touch. This is my favorite because it's 10 faders, small programming section on the side, really great price, 1 DMX output, and it unlocks OSC and everything in the software that you would need. Next, we've got the NX Wing, which is just kind of like the grown-up NX Touch, I like to say. It's a full console wing, so it plugs into the PC, uses the PC as the processing and to run the software, but it's the same hardware you're going to see in the NX2. You know, basically, it's got the same buttons, the same encoders, the same faders. It just doesn't have a console inside of it, and it doesn't have the screen included as well. Now, moving up to the NX2 and 4, these are the consoles in the Onyx range at the time being, and they're both great. They're both awesome. Differences you may note in them is that the 4 is obviously bigger, but it's not a massive console. That's what I love about this thing, is there's a lot of faders and a lot of buttons on it, but you can still pick it up yourself reasonably. You know, having a friend is helpful, but it's not outrageously bulky, and that's great for a lot of shows. Also, the 10 main faders on the NX4 are motorized, okay? On the 2, they're not, but the main 10 on the 4 are motorized, and that is cool as well. The sub faders on the side here are not motorized, and these buttons are not motorized, but they have LCDs above them, which show you what you've labeled your cue lists. Then on the right, guys, we've got Netron. Now, Matthias has been doing Netron webinars every week on the day before this day, which would be Tuesday. Boy, I don't know about you guys, but it sometimes feels like Groundhog Day going through this, where, you know, we're not going many places. We're home every day, and it could feel like Groundhog Day. And so today's Wednesday. On Tuesdays, and there's a Netron webinar with Matthias, which, let me tell you, you know, you can look at this Netron range, and basically see DMX splitters and DMX nodes. And you might think, okay, they're just some DMX nodes. Well, the Netron range, though they don't unlock any capability in Onyx, they're great for output. And there's a lot of functionality built into them. They're not just a simple DMX node. There's things like scene storing and queue triggering, merging, all kinds of stuff built into them. You can see this one on top, and most of the range has Ethernet throughs, so it's got a little switch in there to cascade to other units. Really well thought out design. Thanks to Matthias for designing those. They are really cool and definitely worth a check out. And hey, if you're not doing anything next Tuesday, come check out his webinar. And there's also the advanced webinar tomorrow on Onyx. Got to plug that as well. Now, the Onyx software. Let's talk about the Onyx software. It is designed for touchscreens, and this is what even before we've done these webinars with Elation. This was something that I've always pointed out to people about Onyx, and I've always really liked about it. Is when you look at all of the professional consoles that have a PC program, Onyx is really like the only one that's like really designed for touchscreens, where you can operate it without any hardware attached, and it feels fluid. It feels right. It doesn't feel like you've got to pull open this window here or this window there to get access to faders and stuff like that. It's also identical from the PC to consoles. So whether you're on the biggest console or the smallest PC, your show file can travel between the two, no problem. The experience is the same. The windows are the same. The commands, the way everything works is the same, whether you're on a big console, on a PC, or anywhere in between. And there are 4 free DMX universes out of this thing via SACN and or ArtNet, which is awesome. And if you do unlock it with a Onyx key, or rather, if you unlock it with an NX Touch, Onyx key, and the consoles, you'll get full OSC control. Now, some of you guys might be familiar with this, some of you may not. If OSC and using Touch OSC or something like that is not something that's really important to you, don't worry about this. But if it is something that's important to you, just know that, yeah, you won't be able to unlock it with, you'll be able to unlock it basically with an NX Touch and up, okay? So that's important to know as well. Also, there is the wonderful Capture Visualizer. I've been a longtime Capture user. I think I first bought it 7 or 8 years ago, and Elation here in the US distributes it. It's a great pair with Onyx if you need to pre-visualize, and there are demo files available for it. We'll even launch one later in today's webinar. And so that is cool. We'll connect it. We'll show you how it works with Onyx, and that's a good reminder that I need to launch mine as well. And so let's dive in. Let's head over to the Onyx software, guys. I've got mine loaded here. If you haven't loaded yours yet, just take a minute to do so. Get to this screen real quick, and then we'll be good. We'll all be on the same page. If you don't follow along today, that is totally cool as well. Not required for sure, but very helpful if you are following along. And so this is our main screen here that we're going to see in Onyx, and that's the demo show. In Capture, we'll just pull that to the side for now. Find a place on my screen to hide it. Oh, there's stuff everywhere. But so this is the main screen that you're going to see when you first boot up Onyx, okay? This is where we can create a new show. We can load an existing show. We can join, which is for shows that are on your same network on a different console or computer, or we can continue the last show. Now, you may not see continue if you haven't launched a show before, and that's perfectly fine, totally normal. Just to be aware of that, that's only going to be there if you've launched a show before. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to just kind of go through like the load and save process first, because it's really important to load, save, and open things, in an efficient manner. And so let's go ahead to load. And then we're going to pop over to the samples folder, which if you're new to this, you won't have all these show files in here like I do. And then to Onyx Training 4.4.Onyx Show. And we will launch that here. Once we launch this, I'm going to give you guys a brief tour of everything around the screen. So I'm going to start going once it launches on my computer. But if it's not loaded yet on your computer, that's totally cool, totally understandable, and totally normal. Awesome. So we do get this message when we first launch it. You may see this from time to time, and it's just letting us know that this particular show was created in an older version of Onyx. Saving it will help it load faster in the future. And so that is really key, really important to know as well. Now, looking at our screen here, there's a number of things that we see, and it's important to kind of understand what we're looking at as we get into this thing here. So, um, first things first, guys, we've got here on the side our sidebar views, okay? And they're not only views, but also actually function keys. And so as we click on these different items on the sidebar, we're going to see a number of different views available to us. We also can see, if we scroll down here, down to 16, 17, and 18, there's actually some hotkeys in here, which are great. And so that goes to show that on this sidebar, you can put a lot of things on there. It's not just limited to views, but views are primarily what most people use a lot of these for. Now that we've caught up a view, this group and preset, we've clicked on it, pressed it, and so now it is up. We can see within that view, there are different windows. As I clicked through different views, you saw all kinds of different windows, and that's something we'll notice in Onyx. And it's just to be aware that these are totally customizable. There are stock ones built in, but you can build your own as well, and we'll be using them a lot today. Now, coming across the top bar here in Onyx, we've got the quick menu at the very top here, okay? And the quick menu here, where it says Onyx and we've got the Obsidian, the little Onyx logo, we can press that and it's going to bring us into a place here where we're able to load and save, create new shows, manage our show files, bring up the help manual, lamp on and off fixtures, get to our main menu, patch and display settings, etc. So there's a lot of great things in here, as well as our workspace and sidebar assignments. But for now, we're just going to go back and then head to our next icon, which is for our workspaces. And so workspaces here are just collections of sidebar views and function keys, as well as the encoder wheels on the side. And we can switch between them, rename them, create new ones, et cetera, at will. Really helpful. Our next key actually gets rid of that sidebar. That's really helpful, especially on a second display, or if you're on a computer that doesn't have a lot of resolution, maybe it has a smaller screen, and you want to have that extra space, you totally can. Next, we've got our toggleable Grandmaster and Flashmaster controls. Coming across this big blank section, it's actually not a blank section, but it is the place where our current cue list, when we click on one to select it, is then shown. It's going to give us interesting information about what we've got selected, what we're working with, and can be very helpful during a show situation. Heading to the right from there, we've got a toggler for our channel visualization. A little bit more about that in a second. We've got our virtual console pop-up, our little activity notifier, our chat window, and our question mark. Now, question mark is where I want to stop quick because that is information mode. And why do we like information mode? Well, we like information mode because we can press that and then press on any number of different things within the interface, and it's going to tell us what those things do. Really helpful, especially when you're first starting out. It is super helpful to just be able to get to that information as you go through things. Now, I see a question just came in the chat. Just be aware, guys, that you want to go to the question and answer, the Q&A portion, to answer any questions. We'll stop during various points of today's webinar and answer those, or if they're really simple, they will be answered by the nice folks who are managing the chat, Matthias and Chuck. But if it's visual, they'll leave those in there, and I'll stop for questions from time to time. We'll answer those questions and get you on your way. So be sure to put that in there so we don't miss it. Awesome. So where was I? All right. Coming down the side, guys. Obviously, the X in the corner closes the program, just like any other program on your computer. And then down the side here, we have our encoder wheels. So these are our side encoders or our screen encoders. If you're on an NX2 and NX4, the HD series from Martin, the M1 HD and the M2 Go HD, both of those guys all of those guys have the screen encoders, which means that you can actually on the side of the screen have these little adjusters, these little encoders to be able to go ahead and get control of various attributes, and those are customizable. All right. Then coming down from there, whoop, we're down at the bottom. And in this middle section right here, we've got a number of things. First, I mentioned the channel visualization. When we select a light or multiple lights, we can then see our different parameter groups, and within those, the different things or parameters that the light that we've got selected can do, and we're able to adjust them here. You don't have to keep this up, especially if you're on a console and you've got encoders. You can access it all down here, including using your scroll wheel on your mouse if you're on a computer to move these attributes around, as well as select from this pop-up. Now, things like this pop-up where you get to the different parameters are also available on those NX2s and Wings and NX4s and various legacy consoles from the small screen that is on the surface of the controller. Next, guys, we've got our pop-up right here for our command keypad. So this is the console keypad that you've got on a lot of the consoles, and you can pop it up here on the screen. You can also embed it into your views. And that's important to know, excuse me, that you're able to actually fix this as a part of your views. If you're on a PC or something where you don't have a command keypad in front of you, hey, you can build this into your views as well as pop it up here. And there is a standard keyboard, most helpful when you are on a console and you didn't attach a USB keyboard or you're just not choosing to. This pop-up keypad can help you because then you are able to name stuff, and that's super helpful. Coming left a little bit more, next we have our command line, okay? What this is gonna show us is if it's grayed out like this, that's a command that has previously happened. Whereas, if we start typing on our command line, we're gonna see in white a command that hasn't happened yet. And then once we fire that command, it will turn back to gray. So the command line is a great place to see what just happened or what you're about to do, what you're about to enter, what you're about to program, etc. You can see that right there. Next to the command line, we see our license information. Super important. We talked about earlier how NX Touch and Up unlocks full OSC. NX Key unlocks all the universes as well as the consoles if they're on your network, etc. And to get all the details on your current license, just click right here where, for me, it says Live 128. But for you, it might say free, and it might have a color. For example, if I pop out my key here and give it a quick refresh, I then get free with the green because I've got my touch connected. And it shows, as you can see, the universe processing, the universes in the show, the universe numbers, Dylos zones, OSC, etc. All of that right there. And that can change based on the key that you connect. As you see, I just traded mine out and then placed it back in. Below that, guys, we have the very exciting, very, very cool, and very awesome bottom faders. So our faders, our main faders here on the bottom are actually the same main faders that you're going to see on an NX Touch, on an NX Wing, on an NX2, NX4, M6, etc. Whatever console you're on, these are your 10 main faders. And on the side, 11 through 20 are generally buttons on these various consoles. So be aware of that as well. Also, we can change banks right here where it says main in this demo show. You can go to different banks, which are like pages of playbacks. You're able to switch them here. Awesome, guys. Now that we're here, we're going to go quick. We talked about capture earlier, and I just want to talk to you. Yeah, Chuck, this guy, he got his in the Q&A box. And actually, I want to pull that GM, that question about the Grandmaster. I kind of want to pull that back out. I wonder if I could pull that out of the and put that back in the questions, because I'll show visually a workaround because sure, you can't send the actual Grandmaster, but there's a good workaround to get something to work. And so, you know, go ahead, and I'd love to show that workaround later in the show. And so, but the capture file. So from the Onyx website, support.obsidiancontrol.com, where you go to download the file, you can see the capture file, the Onyx capture training rather .exe, which you're able to launch, and it looks something like this. Now, I'll be using this during today's webinar. You can set it up and use it, especially on other times further, into the future. But I just want to show you quick some of the setup for this file, because it's kind of some basic stuff that whether you're setting up DMX nodes or a visualizer, it can be helpful to you. So first things first, if you do go ahead and you launch this demo file and you see lights on like this, that means that there's no input coming from Onyx. And so let's configure that first. I actually like to close this because I find capture is usually happier if you start the DMX first and then open the program. I'll go to the main menu here, go to the menu, and we're going to go to Ether DMX and then SACN. I like to use SACN. And you know what? I'm using the loopback interface here. You can set it to your Wi-Fi as well, and that tends to work. But what I need to do is actually go to change adapter settings. That's right. I was having an issue with another program the other day, and so had to get rid of that. I'll go the slow way, and I'm going to turn on my loopback adapter real quick. Boop. I'm in my other window here, and I'm going to enable the loopback adapter. Again, if you're just on Wi-Fi on a computer, usually sending your SACN out to Wi-Fi will be just fine. But in this case, I'm going to send it to the loopback adapter, turn on all 4 universes. Remember to use the question box for questions, though I saw this one come up from Kaskin. Can WYSIWYG be used as a visualizer or with its autofocus? I'm going to assume the autofocus can't be used. I've never used it, but of course WYSIWYG should be able to be used as a visualizer. You'll just stream your DMX to it like we're doing here out of Onyx. So basically, I've turned SACN on, universe 1 to 4. Actually, we're only using 3 in this show, but I'm just going to enable all 4. I've set that to my Ether DMX port, which is my loopback adapter in this case. You can use your Wi-Fi, it usually works, and press apply. Once you've done that, you're now sending the signal, and usually if you load the capture file, again, sometimes with network settings, people have issues with this, like I am right now, and then we can go here and set up our universes. Yeah, I'm only getting one of them, and so we'll go to reset my external universes, reset my connectivity options. Whatever, we'll deal with that later as we get to it, because restarting the file may fire that in so capture realizes it. So I can turn that off for right now. We at least have some of the lights, but that would be my answer to WYSIWYG person. Not sure about the autofocus. Matthias could probably chime in on that or do a little research to see, because I'm not sure how that function actually would work. But what we're going to do first, guys, is we're going to actually start with a blank show. Now that we've kind of taken a look at things, got a good lay of the land, we're going to start blank so you can understand the basics of starting a show. So we're going to go to the quick menu here, or if you're on the start screen, you can press new show. Perfect. Then it gives us a little warning about what's going to happen. Then we can call it a nice name, such as webinar, and today is April 8th. And we can press OK. And then it's going to create a new show for us. This new show is going to look a lot like the show we loaded, but there's not going to be a lot in it, and that's okay because we're going to get there. We're going to patch some new fixtures. Awesome. Very cool. And so I'm going to just click groups presets here to get something going on. But what we're going to do first is patch our lights. And so hitting up to Onyx right here, we can then go ahead to patch. Now this is the patch window, okay? This is where we are able to bring in our fixtures, basically tell Onyx what fixtures we're using, and then we're going to be able to bring in those fixtures, get the addresses set, and be controlling them quickly. All right, so first thing we're going to do to begin patching is go down here to this blue section. We are going to press Commands, New Fixture, and then we are going to go first to Elation. But actually, before we get there, I just want to talk about the generic fixtures because we're right here. I've got generic up from last time I patched something, and this is a great time to talk about that. So for a lot of fixtures, you're going to go in this first column under manufacturer. You're going to find the right letter of your manufacturer, scroll through, and you're going to find your manufacturer. But for a lot of particularly LED wash units, you know, strip lights, PARs, whatever, you're going to find that you may just want to operate it in a very simple channel mode, like a 4-channel for an RGBW or an RGBA, or a 5-channel or a 6-channel. You know, one of these channel modes that's very generic, as in a lot of different lights from different brands all have the same channel layout. Well, you can get that within the generic channels, as well as the ability within the generic profiles to patch dimmers. So if you're using dimmers, generic/channel is a great one. Just a single channel DMX profile to control a single dimmer. Or if you go down, for example, to R, and there's a lot of stuff in here, you could go to RGB and you know, get an RGB light. You can go to RGBA, etc. There's a lot of them in here. And I would say if you have a fixture, you know, that's like an LED light of some sort that's non-moving, and you don't see a profile under the manufacturer name, generally you can find something that'll work just great under generic, and you'll never know the difference. Now, let us go to Elation. So DE, I'm just going to press on DEF twice. Then I'm going to scroll down. And the good thing is that Elation and ADJ and the other associated brands are all highlighted, so it's easy to find. And our first fixture here, guys, is going to be the Artiste DaVinci in standard mode. So we got our manufacturer in the first column here. And we're going to go to A for Artiste. I mean, we're already there. Scroll down to DaVinci. Our third column is our mode settings. So we're going to go with standard right here. And then this last column is just the DMX profile. It just lists out the channels for you so that if you're looking at a manual for a fixture and you're saying, okay, which one of these modes matches what I've got, you can compare them and you'll be good to go. Next, we'll press Auto Patch. And this brings us into the patching. So very first thing we can do, as is highlighted here, we've got our cursor in where we are going to go ahead and type in a name. If you have a name for the fixtures that you want to call them, like if you want to call them spots or front truss spots or whatever you want to call them, you can type it in there. I'm not going to do that right now, but then we can add an amount. And so whenever you see a field like this in Onyx, you can use the plus and minus. You can also, once you click in it, you can type using the number pad that's on the console or the number pad on a computer. So I just typed 11 there. If you don't have a number pad, but you do want to type, you can double press and you'll get this pop-up, which is just a number pad you can use and then close to enter your number. Awesome. Next, we've got to set our fixture ID. We're going to set that to 101. Same way of setting that up. I always like to start each type of fixture at a different 100 level. Usually with my dimmers at 1, and then my first moving head at 101, my next at 201, 301, etc. Everybody's got their own different take on it, but I say set your fixture numbers in a way that's logical, that makes sense to you, so that when you get in front of your console, you can quickly look at a light in your rig and be able to determine pretty quickly which one that is and type that in. That's the goal here. Doesn't matter what numbers you use, just that it makes sense to you. We're going to patch this at Universe 1, Channel 1, which is the first channel. And since we don't have anything patched, we can leave this automatic on for the universe and address. If we turn this off, that would allow us to enter a specific universe and number. And you can see here, actually, just to turn it all off for a second, if we turn address off, we get a footprint control. Now, what footprint does is it allows us to expand the channels that the light uses and leave a gap between lights. And so this can be really helpful, like a 5-channel gap like this. If you walk into a venue, you've got to patch their lights, and they went ahead and patched, you know, moving light LED, moving light LED, moving light LED. And maybe the LEDs were 5 channels. You could leave this 5-channel gap and then come back in and add in those LEDs, and it can be a huge time saver. Not something that you touch a lot if you're building rigs from the ground up and setting the addresses from that. But if you're walking into a venue that's pre-addressed and that's how they did it, that is a great workaround for making that happen. As I mentioned, I'm just going to turn universe and address, leave that automatic to on, and when we press apply to patch, it's going to happen. At the top of your screen, you may have seen a progress bar for a second, depending on your computer or console, it'll happen faster or slower. And now we see our fixtures here in the spreadsheet. Let's go patch another fixture. We'll talk a little bit more about this spreadsheet, how it works, what you can do with it once we get some more fixtures in here. So next we're going to go commands, new fixture, same exact thing. Elation. This time we are going to F for the fuse, so D, E, F. Then the fuse wash, Z350. And I believe we're going to 15 channel mode. Yes, we are. And then let's see. They are going to be, if we go to auto patch again, same process. There will be 11 of them. They're going to be at channel 309. I see that in my rig, and that's the next free address. And we're going to put them at ID 201? No, 301. No, 201. I'm reading my notes wrong. Good, 201. And we'll leave all these controls the same. We can then press apply. Awesome. Now that we've seen this apply, we're able to go ahead, and there's a couple things that I can point out about the patch window before we go to patch the rest of our fixtures. And just to give you guys a game plan, if you haven't been on one of these like the past few weeks, we've had them. We're basically just going to go ahead and we're going to patch the demo show file, basically, that Elation provides. And then we're going to come back and load the demo show file and do other stuff with it. So that's the game plan. That's how it's going to work, and that's what we're going to be doing today. So let's go ahead and, the patch sheet while we're here. So on the patch sheet, we see here, it basically looks like a spreadsheet, and it functions just like one too. Okay, we've got our fixture IDs down on the side here, name, column type, universe address, and invert. And we're able to sort by any of these just by, whoops, not by touching them, but by touching the header. We can also, on the side here, look at just single types of fixtures, and as we add more types, they will automatically be added to this side. We can also change things, okay? So if you wanted to change, for example, 101 to 111, we could just highlight it there. And we wanted to put those at 1001. We could just highlight that. Now it says move fixture 101 plus 102, et cetera, at, and then I typed 1001. You can press enter. And then those move. Want to move them back? Sure, why not? There, I typed in back to 101, moved them back after I highlighted them. And so that's the basics of how this works. You can name, you can change any of this stuff later on, which is really helpful. Now let's go ahead to commands, new fixture. And this time, whoa, hey, it looks different. What happened? David, is my console being troublesome on me? No, it's not. This is just what the console does after the second patch to show you the type of lights you've already patched in case you wanted to grab those again. If you don't want to work with those, guess what? We were in the standard library before. Now, other tabs on the bottom of this that you want to be aware of are history. This is going to show you the other fixtures that you've patched lately. User library, which is going to be any lights you've created or brought in custom by yourself. And the search function where we're able to type and then we're able to search, like maybe we search Inno and we see a bunch of ADJ products show up. You can search very quickly, very easily, look through fixtures, find exactly the one you need. We're going to go to the, let's use search. Why not? So let's go with the WW profile, the Elation WW profile, and then we're going to use the one channel mode. And so no matter which window we use at the bottom here to find our fixture, once we've set our mode setting, we'll go to auto patch. Awesome. After that, we can name it. We can set our amount. I'm going to do 5, so I'll use the arrows. Start ID on this one is going to be 1. universe and address, let's see, are going to be right here at the end of the universe. So we'll keep that on auto. Press apply to patch and it's added. Awesome. Let's go ahead now and do our darts 360s. Okay, so we're going to go command new fixture, and there's a couple things I want to show you here, which are going to be helpful. Standard library on the bottom, then elation, then D. Darts 360 is the first one. And we are going to put it in extended mode. Press auto patch. Then we are going to do 12. ID is going to be 401. Yes, we did skip 301. Yes, it does drive me crazy, but it's going to be okay. We'll fix it in a minute. And then for this one, we're actually going to go to the second universe. And so we can see this is actually something that can really help you in your shows. If we go back to universe 1, it's going to show me that 34 channels are free, okay? And so if I patch this right now, it would go ahead and it would patch the first unit, because they're 25 channel unit, on this universe, and then it would bump over to the next universe. And, you know, for my wiring and for the way that the show is going to be done, that doesn't make sense. I want to keep them on the same universe. So let's pop them over to universe 2, address 1. Now we can go ahead and press apply. So you can switch your universe. Address can still be left in auto because we're going to use that first address on the universe, which right now is 1. And we can press apply. Killer. Now, one of the questions we get on these webinars every week, and for good reason, is, hey, what about multi-part fixtures? What if I have a fixture that has multiple cells, multiple parts? How do I patch that? How do I work with that? And that's going to be our last example here in the patch. So go to commands and new fixture once again. As you can see, this is a very repetitive process where you just do the same thing over and over again, and then you're done, which is great. And what we're going to go ahead and do is grab the standard library and go to the elation color chorus. So A, C. There's no B. Apparently, elation doesn't like the letter B for naming fixtures. That's okay. We're not going to hold that against them. It's just kind of interesting. And we'll go to the color chorus 72. We want the 48 channel mode. And now there's a couple great things to talk about right here. A couple really good, exciting, important things. Now, the very first is that this is a 48 channel mode of a 72-inch RGBA light, okay? Now, if I go into my calculator and I say, okay, if it's 48 channels and I've got 4 colors, that's going to be 12 segments, which makes sense across the 72-inch light because that's 6 feet, and 12 segments would be 6-inch segments. And so this particular mode uses red, green, blue, amber, and then it just repeats that over and over again for the 12 segments. Now, that's going to work great, but you're not going to have intensity control of that light. To get that, because it's not in the DMX channels. But don't fear, don't fear, don't fear. We are good here, no worries. Because what we've got is we've got the ability to turn on the virtual dimmer, which is where the console figures out the intensity for you. It's like magic, except it's just math. And I recommend for any LED fixtures or anything like that, just always turn that virtual dimmer on if you see the option. You'll see the option if you're patching a light that has color channels but not intensity. Okay, that's when you'll see it. The only time you don't want to turn it on really is if you've got a light that has some sort of external dimmer, or maybe it's just a color changer or something like that, where there's something else controlling the intensity, another fixture in the show or something like that. In that case, you probably don't want to turn it on, but most of the time, for most people, I would turn virtual dimmer on. You can always change it later by using the swap function. So now we'll press auto patch. We've got all the same stuff. We're going to go ahead and patch. Let's see, we're going to do 8 of these. Start ID 301. That's good because I was starting to go a little crazy having not used the 300s, having skipped over those. Then we're going to go to universe 3. Address 1 is great. Footprint is great. And so now we're going to press apply to patch. Once these patch, we can see in our patch screen here that these guys, they do have a basically a multi-part. So we can hit this little plus sign on any of them, and we'll now see that we have a master fixture 301 And then we have subfixtures for each cell, 301.1 through 301.12. And so the master is going to control any parameters when we're working in Onyx. We're going to select the master and only the master when we want to control any parameter that's over the whole unit. Okay, so for an LED bar like this, that's probably just going to be intensity, maybe some control channels. For a moving light with multiple heads or multiple color cells, that's going to be the intensity, the pan, tilt, anything else in there. Whereas the dot segments, the part fixtures, are going to give us that color control or whatever the parts have of your particular fixture. Awesome. Once we've got that going, we can go ahead and press close patch. Okay. Now, one of the things about lights, though not these lights, is with some lights, you've got to go ahead and strike the lamp to get them started. None of these lights are that way, I don't believe. Maybe the darts, but regardless, if we do need to strike our lamps, we can go up here to the quick menu, press lamp on, and then this is going to lamp on our entire system. Alternatively, it does stagger the command so that they don't all happen at the same time, and the console kind of freezes up. It pauses per se. It doesn't freeze up; it's pausing while it starts those fixtures up. Now, you can also, if you want to do them in segments or just do certain fixtures, you can select those fixtures, which we'll be going over here, and then you can go ahead and press that lamp button, and it will only apply to the fixtures selected. Awesome. So let us go ahead. Actually, usually I go over the capture file here, but that's okay. So now that we've struck some lamps, I'm going to go open my capture file, and hopefully I don't need to touch any of my network settings. We'll find out. Nope. If you open it up and it launches like this, you see no lights, everything's dark. That's a great sign. That means the universes found where they need to go. Everyone is happy and joyous, and life is great. And we're all just smiling and holding hands and dancing in the sunshine. Not right now, though. Obviously, we're not meeting in groups right now. But that's what, if you see it like this, then you're generally good to go. And what I'm actually going to do here, guys, is just walk through checking my rig, because whether you've got a visualizer or a real rig, and you can see my slideshow, that's just lovely, that's okay. Whether you've got a real rig or a visualizer, it's always good to check your rig after you patch it. Just punch through things, make sure you got control of everything that's in front of you. And so I'm going to turn on the highlight function right here. There's a lot of places you can turn that on, including a key on the console. And then I'm going to go down to window number 14, the fixture center. If you've got a smaller screen, you may not see this window. You may need to scroll down to get to number 14, the fixture center. Awesome. So now we can go ahead, go to the auto groups. And this is basically just the auto created groups for each type of light that the console's made for us, okay? So first, boom, the Artiste Da Vinci's. Next, the fuses. They're a little hard to see, but they're there. The WW profiles, which are the front light Lecos. The Darts 360s. Then we have the color cores, and this is the master fixtures. And then we have, that's actually the whole fixture, excuse me. And then I think it's the whole fixture. Let me check. Just pop this up. Yeah, that's the whole fixture. And then we've got the part fixtures, which allows us to get those individual parts with an every 12 filter on them. We'll talk about that in a few minutes as well. Lots of stuff we get to talk about during today's webinar. Now I'm just going to deselect to turn those off and turn off my highlight. This is great. We've seen our rig. Everything works. Nothing's broken. Life is good. Life is good. And so let us go ahead and talk about and build our 2D plan view. So I'm going to go back to full screen here. And the very first thing I'm going to do is just select my Artiste Da Vinci group. You'll see why in a minute. Then we're going to go to 7, our 2D plan view. Press live to click into edit mode. And then we take a sip of tea. Awesome. Once in edit mode, we can then add our fixtures in to our show. All right. And so we're going to just go here to add. Fixtures is by default selected. Then we select our add mode. There's a few different types here. This first one is the single add mode. You'll add each fixture individually. This can work, but it's not my favorite. Next, we've got the line add mode. It's going to add all the lights on a straight line. In my experience, this one tends to work really well for a lot of people in a lot of situations, but not everything. So maybe it's not right for you. Sorry about that. I clicked over to Zoom. Um, then we've got the squiggly line mode, or the freeform line as it's officially called. And this is what it sounds like. You draw a squiggly line and it's going to automatically, evenly place those fixtures along that line. This can be really helpful if you're tracing out like a set design or something that's kind of funky. You can totally follow that with ease, which is great. Next, we've got the circle mode, great for circle trusses and stuff like that, just so that you are able to arrange lights in a circle. And then we have the matrix, or the rows and columns, where basically we're going to set the amount of columns. The amount of lights we have is going to determine, based off of those number of columns, the number of rows, and then it's going to build a grid for us. For this example, I'm going to use the straight line add mode, press place fixtures, and then you can see here we get some instruction here to draw a line to place our items. These dots will help you line things up as well. Get it looking real nice, and then let go. You can do this on a touch screen as well, though it's definitely not as precise as with a mouse. And of course, to the consoles, you can connect a mouse. Perfect. And so once you've got it looking happy, it looks great. We'll go ahead, let's grab in and bring in our next fixture here. So we're going to go ahead, we're kind of making this demo file that I had up in the visualizer a second ago, visually. And so we'll go back to the fixture center. This time grab our fuse washes. Back to our friend the 2D plan, add. And this time we'll use the single add mode. Place fixtures, and I'm going to add them in, quote, as straight of a line as I can. Okay, maybe that was a lie. That's not a very straight at all. It doesn't look very good, and it's probably not how the rig is actually laid out. If it is, I have some other questions for you. And so what we're going to do here, guys, is use the align tools up here to really get these things happening and really get them in a good place. And so if I go here and I click and drag all of these fixtures, what I want to do basically is I'm just going to start moving them around. You can highlight, you can move around here with the box here to grab more lights and move stuff around, etc. Just keep them in order generally that you want them to be. And then we're able to go ahead, select all of these guys. Oops, I missed one. And use the align functions. Now, within align, we're going to go here, and there's a lot of things we can do here, all right? And so we can go ahead, we can align top or bottom, as is going to work with us here. We can also, if we're doing something vertical, we can go to one side or the other, left or right. For this one, I'm going to go top, and then spread, I'm going to spread even horizontally, all right? Now it's looking a lot better. We can now drag all of this as a group, align them up really nice until we get what we want. And actually, I want to kind of do this, drag this over here, drag this 201 wider, and then highlight these all. You can see how quick this can be once you get used to it. Align, spread, boom, done. All right. Now, of course, as we mentioned before, guys, we've got those multi-part fixtures sometimes, those lights that have multiple parts. And how do we bring those into the 2D plan? Well, it's very important to do it right, to get the fixture in as it's multi-part, and we can scroll like I am, by the way, to resize it. It's very important to get that right so that you're able, if you're using Dylos for pixel mapping, or even if you're not, just to be able to see all of the attributes of that fixture, to be able to see the different cells that it has, etc. So I'm going to go back to add mode, but this time we're going to go with combined fixtures, okay? And within combined fixtures, you'll see all of the multi-part fixtures that are in your show. In our case, there's 8 of them. So I'm just going to select these guys by pressing on them or using my mouse. And then I'm going to go ahead and I can slow down a little bit, but if we're going to go through and cover everything we've covered every other week, we also need to stay on time as well. And so, and Shep is a student of mine as well, so we can go over stuff later. But good to have you here, Shep. But multi-part fixture. So add, we've selected all these combined fixtures, which I just done before I got distracted by Zoom. I shouldn't look at the chat, but I did. And then we can choose an add mode. I'll use the line for this one, place combined fixtures. And then we can see these are a nice strip light and they're coming in that way. Unfortunately, all on top of each other, of course. So what are we gonna do to fix that? Good question. Well, what we can do here is just, if you have the options tab open like I do, we're able to rotate. And rotate is a glorious and wonderful thing, all right? And so we can go ahead, rotate these nice and tall. Perfect. Then while we still have them selected, it's easiest to select them all here, make them look nice, do whatever we want with them, etc. All right. And whenever you see a combined fixture like this with all these cells, they're all going to light up separately in your 2D plan as you control those lights separately. And so that is something that is super helpful, super awesome, and really, really good. Okay. And so do be aware of that as well. Now, besides just dropping fixtures, there's a couple other things we're able to do here within the 2D plan. We can add zone fixtures. That's for Dilos. I'm not going to cover that right now. Groups. And so if you've made groups or if you've got the automatic groups, we can just select them. This is cool. And bring in those groups for selection. Maybe I put them at the top today. Whoop. Maybe I spread them out a little. It's my align function, more or less. The names are all different amounts. I'm actually going to delete this one here and confirm it. And then line these lovely lights up again. And then we have groups that we can work with. There's a lot of other things in here too. So we can also create different pages, okay? So across the bottom here, we've got our pages. And we can add pages to add more 2D plan views. And so this is super helpful because depending on your rig, depending on exactly what you're doing, you could go ahead and you could have a front view, you could have a top view, you could have a side view. You could have a magic sheep type view where each type of fixture is in rows and columns and easy for you to grab a hold onto. You could have whatever views you wanted, truth be told. I don't know if there's a limitation. Maybe there is on them. Can't remember, but you can have a lot of pages if you want them. Also, besides pages, within the individual page, we have layers. And so layers, I'll just take off the options so we see just layers here. Layers are just like layers that you would find in a video or photo editing program. And layers just allow you to have different layers that you put different lights on. Now, why could this be helpful? Well, you could have a layer for your background. You could have a layer for different groups of lights, etc. And then you're able to, lock those layers, turn beams and the lighting on and off for each layer, turn on and off images, select, deselect, manage the text, etc. And so there's a good amount you can do with those layers, especially if you're going to be a heavy user of the 2D plan. You're able to just simply add them using this add key. You can rearrange them using these arrows, rename, delete, and copy using those. And the same goes for pages. And so layers can be really helpful. It just depends on how much you're going to use the 2D plan. Some people use the 2D plan a lot. Some people don't use it as much. It just depends on how you like to program and what you like to do. Awesome. So now, guys, we're going to go ahead, turn off the layers here. Doesn't matter if you do that really. And press edit mode to go back into live mode. So now we're actually seeing the 2D plan. We're actually working with it live. And I'm just going to kind of highlight over here to deselect to clear. And now we're going to go ahead and stop for some questions. So I know we had one question that came in earlier that said, how do you set the Grandmaster to a fader on the NX Touch? And I thought that was a great question because you can't assign the Grandmaster to a fader. Chances are you probably came from the first console, the first moving light console that I ever knew. We don't need to name it here, where when you start a new show, by default, one of the faders was the Grandmaster. There wasn't a separate one. Maybe that's your experience, maybe not. But regardless, what we can do, and we can go over this again when we're programming, is we can select all our lights, build an inhibited fader with every light in the show, and then store that to a fader on our NX Touch. And so then we're effectively going to have Grandmaster control as long as we don't touch the real Grandmaster. We only touch the one on our touch. And we're able to have that within there. So that's a definite workaround. But guys, if there's any questions about what we've gone on so far, patching, 2D plan view, etc., anything we've gone over so far today, we're happy to answer those as we go forward. You know, we don't want you to be lost going into the next segment of today's webinar. And so we want to make sure we follow things. All right, Shep asks, how do I change the order of the options on the left? I believe you're talking about the sidebar buttons here. And this can be done pretty easily. And so just go ahead and close those out. Awesome. And so that can be done pretty easily. We can just go ahead to the workspaces, unlock workspace. This is called managing your views and workspaces, basically. And then you're able to go ahead, right click on any of these, press edit function. And now we're able to click on each button here. Let me go to one I won't use, like this one here. And we can then choose, once we've selected the actual sidebar button that we're working with, we can choose any of the views, any of the windows, any of these commands, fixtures, groups, presets, and banks. You choose what you want, and then it is automatically on that sidebar. So I believe we were on views and the presets PT, CPG, and that's how you change those. When you're done, lock workspace again, just to keep it from you accidentally messing stuff up, because I know I do that all the time if I leave it on. Awesome, guys. Let me know if you have any other questions. Thankfully, since we've done these a few weeks in a row, there's not as many people on this one. And so, you know, previously we've gotten a lot of questions during each question segment, and that's great. But not a problem if we don't have a ton. I'm going to grab a sip of tea here. Well, I just make sure there aren't any more questions coming in. All right, Shep. So yeah, just like we were talking about, you said you want to simply adjust the order of the row, and you can just do that by going to the buttons individually in that assigned function window that we were in, and then just selecting the buttons you want in the order you want for each button. There isn't really like a move button. You just go to the button you want, select what you want the function to be, and then go to the next one, select the function, etc. Awesome, guys. So I think that's all the questions we have, which is totally cool for this segment. And so now we're going to hop into our next section of the webinar, which is what I call the not so quick start. Because when I presented this as a webinar that was in about half the time of this one, it was definitely a quick start. But in this one, we can take a little bit more time, answer a few more questions, and cover things a little more in depth. And so what we're going to do in the not so quick start is we're going to go ahead and create some queues starting with groups. So by the end of the not so quick start, which is where we'll take our next questions, is we're going to go ahead and we're going to start with groups, then we're going to build some presets, and we're going to build some queues. But before we get there, we want to talk about all three of these and how they relate. So you really understand, like, as I'm getting into this and actually doing it, you're not like, David, why are we doing this? I don't know why I need this. We're going to explain why you need it first, and then we are going to go ahead and actually do it. And so groups, guys, are a building block for queue creation. That's what I like to envision all of this stuff as different blocks that we put together. And in particular, groups are just simply selections of fixtures. And so it's anytime we want to grab multiple lights at the same time, we're going to store that to a group button. And groups can be any sort. You already saw, that we worked with groups such as one for our entire, for each type of light, okay? We can also make groups for, a single truss or lighting position. We can make a group that has all of our lights in it, for example. Any particular light or fixture can be in any number of groups. I mean, hey, you can even store a group that just has one light in it. Totally fine, totally doable. It's just anytime you want to select a light or multiple lights from the group's window, store it as a group. You can have lots. And so we go from groups, and the next thing we do are presets, okay? And presets are our next building block for queue creation. And That's where we take the lights, the groups, the individual fixtures, etc. You might notice I use the word fixtures and I use the word lights here, and they're generally the same thing. We call them fixtures just because they could be things that aren't lights, like media servers, like hazers. These things don't have light coming out of them, but they are controllable. And so presets are generally grouped into intensity, position, color beam, beam effects, and framing. The parameter groups that we see in Onyx for everything is just a way to organize the different parameters that we've got and use them in our show. And so what we do, the way that this flows as we're recording, is we start with those groups, okay? We select one or many groups and we put them in presets. We apply presets to them. Now, there's a few important things about presets. When we build our first presets, what we're going to do when you build a preset is you generally want to select all of your lights that have whatever function, whether it be intensity or color or position. Select all those lights and build them into that preset, okay? So it could be an at full preset for intensity. Pretty much every fixture in your show will be part of that. It could be a position preset for any lights that move, such as downstage center for your lead singer. It could be a color preset for blue for any lights that have color. Whatever it is, what we want to do is store all of the lights that can do that thing within that preset. That doesn't mean we have to apply that preset to all those lights though, because when we select lights or select a group and then we put it in that preset, only the lights that we selected will have that preset applied, okay? Even though there's more lights stored on that preset a lot of the time, only the ones we've selected have that applied. Now, the reason why we use presets, and presets are so important and so helpful in Onyx, is because if we go back later and we need to update a preset, say we walk in and our blue isn't right, or we go to a new venue or something moves on stage and our position's not right. We may have stored a given preset, like a position or a color, into, say, 500 different cues, okay? Very doable, even more than that. And we don't want to have to go edit those 500 cues because that would stink. But what we can do is just simply update our preset of blue or our preset of downstage center. And when we do that, every cue that was created with that preset is going to be updated. And so you don't have to go and update a bunch of cues, just update the preset. It's going to save you a lot of time. It's going to save your butt. And even though it takes a second more in the front end to get that thing going, it's well worth the time. And you will find as you do more lighting that sooner or later it will bite you in the butt and you'll wish you would have built the habit of always using presets. So do me a favor, do everyone a favor, and build the habit, build the good habit. Use the presets first and everything will be just wonderful. Last but not least, you might have been waiting for this. We're getting to cues. And so cues are the finished work that we play back from a fader, button, or on-screen control. In Onyx, that's called a cue list. Now, when we press play on a cue, we only have to do that. And we see whatever we recorded to it. And so it's different from groups or presets because to get the right combination of things that we want, we may have to select multiple groups and put them in multiple presets. But once we store that to a cue, then we just play that cue and we're going to see it come back. We're going to play it back. It's just going to happen. Okay. And cues are, as I mentioned, put into cue lists. Now, when we first record a cue list, it's going to be a cue list with a single cue in it. And so you don't really see that list functionality in the sense of having multiple cues. But when you do stack multiple cues in a single cue list, you're going to see something called tracking, okay? Now, tracking is what happens when you record a null or no value into cues versus recording a 0 or a actual value. It can both help you and hurt you. So tracking is just, to make it simple, is the way that consoles like Onyx store cues in cue lists. And when you play things back, it is evident what you stored there and what you didn't. So only the things that you touched, that you brought into the programmer, we'll talk about the programmer more in a minute, and you worked with before pressing record, only those things get recorded to a cue. This is really powerful in a console, and we'll go into this more today because you can then have different cue lists playing back different things in different combinations at different times, all able to work independently. Where it can bite you in the butt, though, is with tracking if you're not paying attention to what you're doing or you're not aware of it. And so that's why we're going to make you aware of it right here. So in this example, we've got 3 cues down the left side, and then our columns on this little spreadsheet here are 4 lights, just simple dimmers, on and off intensity control. So we see in Q1, dimmer 1's at 100%, dimmer 2's at 80, and then dimmer 3 and 4 are not recorded, okay? And so they're not in that queue. Now, if I started up the console from scratch, have nothing playing, and I play back this queue, dimmer 1 and 2 are going to be at full, dimmer 3 and 4 are going to be at 0, or whatever their default value is, which for any dimmer or intensity level, by default, that's going to be 0. But if I had something else playing, say I had dimmer 3 up at 60% in another queue, well then, that would be on at 60% in this queue. And if that's what I wanted, great. But if you wanted it to be off in that queue, you would need to store it as a 0, like I have in this third queue here. Tracking not only works between different queue lists, but also within the same queue list. So if we look here at dimmer 1, dimmer 1's a good example here. It's at 100% in Q1. There's no value or null in Q2. And then Q3 has a 0%. And so in Q2, we're going to see that dimmer at 100%. It's going to track through. It's going to go to 0 at Q3. But if I change in Q1, that level, I update that to 85%, then we'll now see it at 85% in Q2. And usually, that makes sense. Another example is that, at the end of the list, here we've got dimmer 2 at 80%. Then it goes to 75. And in Q3, it's going to stay at 75% because we're in this queue list and, nothing's recorded there, but there was previously. And so it's just really important to know and to understand that anything you can and do record into a queue gets played back. But what you do not record, the things you don't put in the queue, can sometimes be just as important. And, once in a while you might see something, a queue play back, and it might not look exactly the way that you thought it would. And often that's due to some tracking going on. Maybe you didn't add something in that you needed to, maybe, etc. All right. And so let's go ahead and actually do it now. We're going to go here to the main Onyx window. And what we're going to do actually is we're going to load our show. Okay. So we're going to load that demo show just by going to Onyx, going to load. We did this earlier. Going to, if we're in the Onyx folder within the consoles or PC, the documents in Onyx folder, we'll find it in samples and Onyx training 4.4.onyx show. You can then press open. And in just a second, we'll have this open. And actually, while we're here, this is something that I usually do during questions, but take a minute to look away from your screen. Take a minute to stretch out a little bit because this is a 3-hour webinar and we can't just stare at the screen for 3 hours. That's real bad for your eyes and your body. And so while that show loads, just stretch for a minute. We get the same warning again about the show being updated. Stretch, grab a quick drink of your tea, your coffee, your water, whatever you got. All good stuff. Let's go ahead and build our first group. So we should all have the demo show loaded. For some of you guys, it might be still loading, but that's okay. I'm not going to jump into doing stuff too fast. I'm going to explain and show you some stuff first. And so we can then go to groups presets, our first view on the left side here. And the top here is groups and the bottom is presets, okay? And so let's just go ahead and build a new group. We can press on any of these, okay? We can press on any of these and be able to select any of the groups. But we also want to build a group, and so that's what we're going to do first. A great tool to do that is we just want to select our lights, okay? And so we can go look in the 2D plan. I'm going to go to the front view here to be able to go ahead and select those lights, okay? And so what we're going to do here, guys, is we're going to basically we can select a few different ways. Sorry, I got distracted by the questions. Shouldn't do that. We'll be going up to questions in a few minutes. So there's a few different ways we can select things. If we're in the 2D plan view here, we can press or click on items. We can drag a box around them to select them. I mean, there's even other selection options up here in 2D plan. But if we're on a console especially, I'll press clear once to clear my selection. We can use our keypad. And the keypad is a quick way to be able to select lots of groups, lots of individual fixtures, because we can go ahead and let's just select 101, whoops, not 104, 101, and then we're going to go through, and we've got 11, 111, enter. And so right there, as you can see, demonstrated in the 2D plan, we selected 101 through 111 using our command line. But there's a lot more that we can do with selections before we make a group. So if I press clear once again to clear the selection, clearing twice will clear everything. But right now we're just working with selections. I could go in and I could select 101 through 111 minus, using the minus key here. Maybe I want to do minus 104 through 108. And I could leave it there and it would do 101 through 103 and then 109 through 111. Or I could add some more stuff to it for fun. Maybe I go plus 106, the center fixture. So I do that, I get that exact selection. And so there's a lot that we can do here, guys, in order to select different ways of fixtures, especially using the command line. But you can also go ahead and simply drag on screen. Like if I clear here and I just want to select these fixtures right here, I can totally do that and they're selected. Now, one thing we notice when we're selecting is that one fixture, one light here, has a red surrounding it. It's got a red box around it. What's the red box mean? Great question. So the red box is the last selected fixture, the last fixture in the selection order. Now, that might not sound like too meaningful to you, but it is important because the order that we select our lights in and the order that we program those to groups is going to be the order that things like fanning, that things like effects are applied to the lights, even the grouping tools that we'll talk about in a few minutes, okay? And so it's very important to logically select things before you put them in groups. For me, that usually means left to right or down to up or up to down. For you, it might be different. But you always want to select lights in a logical way that's logical, visually on your stage so that when you do playback effects or things on it, it happens logically. Unless, of course, you don't want it to happen across things logically and then store it in whatever order you want. And so, David, how do we store that stuff? Great question. So heading back to the Groups and Presets window, we can simply now go ahead, press record, and press any of the blank tiles to store a new group. So I'll choose number 55. Now we've created the new group. It has exactly those lights in it. And if we type right now, we can name it. And so I'm going to call it my cool group, apparently without any spaces. And I'm going to press enter. And now I've named it my cool and awesome group. So anytime right after we select a group, by just deselecting it, we can type again and give it a new name. Maybe the coolest group. I am not centered on my keyboard and it is showing. And we can press enter and rename it. And this is going to work for naming of groups, presets, all sorts of stuff inside of our show. So it's important to get it right. Now, besides just creating and naming these things, there are other things we can do with groups, such as here on our keypad, we see copy, move, and delete. This is great for managing our groups. And as we'll show you, various things with presets, various things with cues are going to work exactly the same way. And so I can go ahead and press copy, press the group I want to work with, and press where I want it to go. And then we're going to copy that group. Move works the same way. Move, press the group, press where I want it to go. And then delete works very similarly, where we can press delete, press that group, press enter, and then it asks us to confirm. And you can know inside of Onyx, anytime that you do go ahead and confirm that group, you can totally go in and you're able to, if you has to confirmed on a deletion, basically, it's going away for good. Okay. And so do be aware of that because you really don't want to, you don't want to miss out on that for sure. All right. So that's very, very helpful. Now, besides storing, besides things are moving on my screen, I'll just ignore that. Besides copying, moving, and deleting, we can also merge into groups and overwrite and do other things in order to change the amount of lights that we have in our groups. Okay. So say I select the coolest group here, and this time I'm going to look at the programmer screen. Now, the programmer screen is really helpful because it's basically just a big old spreadsheet that shows us what lights we've got selected, and it shows us what we've done to lights before recording. So if we're getting ready to record, we can always look in the programmer, see exactly what we're about to record, decide, hey, is the stuff in here? Is everything in there what we want? Is it not? Do we need to add some things? You can see that within this screen. And so what we see here is that this group has 101 through 105, 107 through 111. Maybe we want to add 106 back in. So I could go in and just type 106, enter, and now we've selected that light and added it in. Now, it's in the selection. The one that we've added most recently is last in the selection order. But if we're good with that, we could go ahead, we could press record, and we could press on the coolest group. Now we've got some options as to what we do once we record this coolest group ever. And what we're able to do is merge. Merge is going to add new stuff. That's what we're doing here. We can also replace. Replace is kind of like the opposite. It's going to replace that group with what you've presently got selected. And so replace is generally the most helpful when you want to remove things from that group. But you're not going to keep anything that was previously there. Okay. Only what you've selected is going to be replaced. Then we have edit command and cancel command. Edit command lets you go back to your command line and be able to change what you're asking the console to do. And then cancel command is going to cancel and just allow you basically to cancel it, allow you to make it not happen. It's if you went recording, you accidentally pressed on a group, but you meant to press a blank spot. That's a good place to do it. But you could even edit the command for that. And then you could use the backspace and you could change the group number right here to something else, maybe 54. But for now, we're going to do 55. We're going to merge. And once we do that, we can clear, reselect, and see in our programmer exactly what we had before. Exactly the same selection of those items in the same order. So that's important to know. Okay. Now, while we're here talking about groups, there is here the grouping tools available here at the top of the groups window, as well as a variety of other places inside the console, such as on the encoder wheels. You can find it in the effects. You can find it in the top of the 2D plan. There's a number of places. You just never know where you're going to see it. And what is the grouping tools? Well, I'm glad you asked. Okay, so the grouping tools, sorry guys, this can turn into a monologue sometimes. But the grouping tools are just simply a way to be able to select different lights and be able to select them in different groupings. And so I'm going to clear, select my Artiste Da Vinci group, and head over to the 2D plan view. This is especially easy to see in that view, and I'm actually going to downsize this a little, go find my capture window, make sure it's still happy. Great. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on highlight and then take a quick sip of tea so I don't lose my voice. And all highlight's going to do, like we talked about earlier, is it just brings the lights we've selected to full. It opens them up, opens up the color, opens up the shutter, opens up the gobos, etc. And allows us to identify that light that we've got selected. And that can be helpful when we're talking about things such as the good old grouping tools. Now, the good old grouping tools are our real good friends. They are fun and they are very helpful in a lot of show situations. So right now, I see right here when I pop down my grouping tools that I have 10 lights selected. Okay. Now, the very first thing I can do here is I could do every, and by default, the mask value is 2. Okay. So the grouping tools simply goes in here and it allows you to make more complex selections of lights. And so what we've done here, if we kind of take the 30,000 foot view back up a little bit, is we see here across these 10 fixtures, we've gone ahead and we've selected every other fixture. But we haven't really deselected the other half. They're just inactive. Now, if we press next, we get the other half. And you can see that in my visualizer. I know I've got a little bit of it cut off, but that's okay. We get the idea. Okay. And so this is where you can start to see how the grouping tools are really powerful. We can do, instead of 2, maybe we do every third light, every fourth, every fifth. And we can see the selection is going to change based on what we select. But every is not the only grouping tool by far. There is also block. Block here, as you can see, block of 3 just selects that first 3 fixtures. And then allows us to next and last through the fixtures in groups of 3s till we run out. You can see here we have 10 fixtures, so 3, 6, 9, and then the last one is just 1. So grouping tools are always going to look best if your mask value is a number that's divisible by the total number of lights, but that doesn't mean you can't use any lesser or any other number of lights that's not directly divisible. Okay, very important there. We've got divide, which is kind of like the opposite of block, because instead of instead of doing a block of 2, which is great. It's especially great if you've got like blinder type lights or some sort of LED wash with a few cells in it. That's really helpful for. But divide is kind of the opposite of that because it takes your total, all 10 in this example, but it would change depending on the number of lights that you've got selected, and divide it by whatever the mask value is, nice and evenly or as evenly as it can. Next, we've got mirror. For example, a mirror of 2, popular one to use, gives you, starting from the outside, going to the inside, sets of 2 lights. Very quick to be able to program when you do this. And then we have group, which is if you've selected multiple groups, before going to the grouping tools, you'll toggle through those individual groups using the group selection. Awesome. So what we're actually going to do, let's just press clear once and show you one more cool thing with the grouping tools. So I'm going to select 101 through 111, 111, 101 through 111. And see those Artiste Da Vinci's light up. Then I'm going to go grouping every 2. Now I've got every other light perfectly symmetrical of my rig of these particular fixtures. What I'm going to do now is go ahead to the groups and presets window, record and make a new group. Okay. This is now the coolest group. I'm going to type that on my command line. Let me just resize this a little bit so we can see my command line. And we have slightly mistyped, not that that'd be any different from other shows I do, the name of now the coolest group. And why this is now the coolest group is if we clear and reselect it, we can see that we have the E2 in the corner. Now that means that every other light that grouping tool filter is actually coded. It's actually recorded into that group. Pretty cool, huh? And so what this means is that, you're able to go ahead and store those grouping tools into groups to select things really quickly and work with them as you build your cues. We'll talk about that in a minute, okay? For now, guys, I'm going to turn off highlight, I'm going to clear, and we're going to talk about presets. And so presets, recording and using, actually, I'll dock this right over here. It's beautiful. Recording and using them is pretty similar to the groups, okay? For example, if I select the fuse washes this time, and I go to intensity here on my encoders, I just popped it up using this arrow, or if you've got a console in front of you or an M-Touch, you'll see this on your encoder wheels or belts. We can go to intensity, and then I want to take them, we'll hit the full button, but then we'll go to 95 just to record something we don't have. maybe this is super nuanced and we see the clear difference between 195 and we want 95 recorded. And, in some shows, you certainly can see that difference. We'll go ahead, press record, and then press a preset. Okay. Now, as I noted before, and I'll point out here, the presets are sorted into different windows for intensity, pan tilt, color, gobo, beam, beam effects, and framing. Now, when we press record and we record into any of these windows, by default, it's only going to record the attributes of that parameter group. So for this particular light under intensity, that would be output or intensity, as well as the shutter/strobe function of this moving light. Depending on exactly what light you have, this may vary a little bit. And so what we're then going to do is we're going to go ahead and maybe what we really want to do when we're building a preset is store every light to that preset, okay? So just to show you another example, we can press clear twice. That's going to clear everything out of our programmer. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to select all of our lights here. We don't have to select the fuse washes. We did those before. Now, when we select all the other lights, we notice that this actually grays out. And this is the indicator that the lights we have selected, none of them are in this preset. Intensity up to 95%, because that's what we like right now. Record, press that same preset again. And then we have the ability to merge, replace, edit the command, or cancel. Looks familiar, huh? Just like the groups. And so we're able to merge, which is going to add new stuff. That's what we're going to do. If we press replace, we would fully replace that preset, meaning that the fuse washes, which are not currently selected, but were in the preset originally, would be wiped out. Or we can edit the command or cancel. We're going to merge. Perfect. And so now, if we clear, we have everything in this preset. All of the lights in the show, all the moving lights are now in this preset. And so what we can do, as we mentioned before, is we can select just some of the lights and place it in that preset at will. Okay, and this is very important. We always want to go through presets before we record cues. All right. Now, on the topic of presets, copy, move, and delete works just like the good old groups. We like them so much. So I'm going to press clear twice, which again is that full clear that programs out that selection and anything we've done. And then we can go ahead, we can copy, press that preset, press where we want it to go, move, press the preset, press where we want it to go, delete, press the preset, enter, and it does go away for good. And so you want to make sure you do that on purpose whenever you do. Works exactly the same way though, which is great. So looking at my notes here, let's see what we're going to do. All right, now we get to move on to cues. Isn't this so lovely? Because everybody wants to be able to get to something where you can record and press play. And cues are how to do that. But there's a lot into cues actually, besides just recording your first cue. We're going to talk about a lot of different things during this segment. So let's build our first cue. Very first thing we're going to do is just select some lights. So let's select our Artiste Da Vinci's. And now we're going to go ahead and we are going to go ahead and take them to full through preset number 4, intensity at 100%. We're then going to go ahead, go to pan tilt and give them a position such as, why don't we go to the keyboard player today? And then we can go ahead and give them a color. For this example, let me actually click on now the coolest group, because that's going to give us that every 2 selection value. And I'll do blue. Actually, I want to do mixed blue, even though it's super dark. Let's do cyan mix then. And then I'll press next and do mix magenta. Awesome. Looks good. Now we're going to go ahead. Very simple to do. I just got to reset my window just a hair smaller so we can see the entirety of the screen. Very important, but we want to make sure everything fits. And now we're going to go ahead and press record and find a blank playback to record on. Now, because we're in the demo show, our playbacks are full here. I do want to record this in a new cue list. So I'm just going to click main here where this bank is. go to bank 3, I believe is blank. Yeah. And then I'll just type and click that first cue list. And now we've got a couple other options. You're like, more options? We don't need more options. Yes, you do. More options are great. You don't have to use them, but they're there for you if you want them. So the very first thing we see here is the blinking cursor. That is a place to name our cue list. It's a great place to do it. You can change it later, but it's easiest to do it now. So I'm just going to call it test cue list. And then I'm going to make it the cue list type, the red type right here. And we'll go into all the types in just a little bit here. And now the cue list is recorded. So if I press clear twice, and then I play my cue list back, I watch everything in that queue fade in at 2.5 seconds, which is the default time in Onyx. And so once we play that back, hey, we're free. We've cleared twice. That clears out our programmer fully. We're now able to go build another queue if we want, or do other things, whatever we want to do. So let's go ahead real quick and just record a second queue on this list. So I'm going to grab my coolest group ever. And for our second queue, let's just flip the colors. So we'll do magenta first. We'll do cyan second. Did I get that magenta first? Oh, you know what? I think I have. Yeah, I had a color in the color wheel. So now we're able to see that cyan. Whoop, that magenta. I think this is opposite of what I did before. So now we can go ahead and press record. We can press the same cue list. Also, this cue list is got the white box around it, and we see it at the top. That means it's the selected cue list. And so I could just press enter here as well as pressing that cue list. And now I've got a second queue on that list. If I clear twice, I can then go ahead, play back into that second queue. It fades a little bit funky because I had the color wheel on the first queue accidentally. But regardless, we've got our second queue. Now that we have a second queue, we can talk a little bit about timing of the queue list, changing the names of the queues, etc. And we're going to do that through our queue list values window, okay? This is the window right here, which is basically, as you can see on the right here, it looks a lot like the programmer, but it is what's actually in the queue, what's been recorded and what's in there. And this is a really great diagnostic tool, this whole window is. When you play back something and you either see something happen in your show that you didn't think was supposed to happen, or maybe you don't see something that you thought was supposed to be in the queue, this is a great place to check it. And so what we see here, we've got two halves to the queue list values. This is the selected queue list on the left and the queue list values on the right. And for a queue list that we've got selected, that is the one with the white box around it that we've pressed on, we then have all of our queues. We can click on them and we see what's in those queues, okay? Put out here on the side. It tells us everything we've recorded. It's really helpful. Then we can go ahead, we can go into edit mode, and we're able to go ahead then and change a variety of things. For example, clicking here where it says test queue list, the queue list name, we could now change it to something different. We can click on one of the queues and we can name the queue something descriptive. Oh boy, I'm really pulling the dad jokes today. That's not good. We could go ahead and name our second queue. We can go ahead, click. It's just click and type in here, which is really helpful. Maybe our fade times, maybe we want them to be at 1 second. So we'll set those both to 1 second. We can highlight multiple, change them. A lot of things we can do in here. When we are done in here, there's a lot in here. I didn't go over all of it, but it is all in the manual and et cetera. We'll talk about that at the end. We can click out of edit mode, and that now locks the editing so that you don't accidentally click and change a bunch of timings to queues without even realizing it, because that would be bad. And so that is the queue list values screen. Now, we also have the ability, and this is good stuff, to move our queue list around, okay? So far, I've showed you guys recording queues, and we recorded it to fader one of our main playbacks. And we're able to go use copy, move, and delete to put the same queue list on different playbacks. Now, notice some of the terminology I'm using here. Queue list, playback. They're not the same word. They're different. And we're using different terms for good reason here because they are referring to different things. So a cue list is what's made when we record. But a playback is a location that that cue list is being played from, whether that be a fader, a button, some combination of the two, etc. And so when we press record and we go to record something, there's a number of places we can do it. As I mentioned, here at the bottom, we've got the 10 faders and 10 buttons next to it. And that's going to be the 10 faders and buttons on the NX Touch, on the 10 faders on the NX2, the NX4, the 10 faders, 10 buttons. Older consoles, same kind of thing with a lot of them. But there's a few other places we can record to, such as if we go over here to the Playback workspace, we have the Playback buttons window. This is a virtual Playback buttons window. And so what that means is that these are not physical buttons on any console, but they can be great on a touch screen. You can fire them. You can also fire them other ways, like through, MIDI commands or whatever else, some other macros. But, oh, good, Chuck's back. Good to have you, Chuck. And so you can record to these Playback buttons. We can also, if we go down to Virtual Console here, on the side of the consoles is the sub playback section. And so the NX4, this would be if you're on a Martin M1, that's where you'll find these playbacks. The layout here matches those consoles, but if we go over to DJ, we have a nice window. If you have an M Play at the bottom here, this is the M Touch. This is the M Play layout, which is just simply, the M Play is just simply the sub playbacks. It's 1 through 12 are the faders. Then the buttons lowest below those faders are 13 through 24. Then we've got 1 through 24 on the keypad on the side. And so those are all the places you can record to. And as I mentioned, you can literally copy, press a playback, copy it somewhere, move it, put it somewhere else. Then you could go ahead and delete that playback off of that cue list. And oh no, I lost my cue list. What in the world am I going to do? Well, there are a couple ways we can do this. So going back to the Compose workspace, guys, down here, number 15 on your sidebar, number 1 in our hearts, we have the cue list directory. And this is where all the cue lists actually live and are actually fired from. Okay. And so that means that basically, if you delete, a cue list off of all your faders, you want to bring it back, because even there I deleted off the fader, but it's still playing. And so I'd have to go here and stop it if I wanted to really get rid of it. We can just copy from the cue list directory back to the fader, get it back. Everything's good. And so you may have noticed, like when I deleted it off that fader, there was no confirmation because it doesn't really get deleted. It's still in the directory. You can still get it back, and so there's no need for a confirmation there. Awesome. Now, let us talk about the playback types. I know we've gone over like a lot of technical data so far, and so we'll go over the playback types here. We'll talk about them all, and then we'll take a few more questions here, which I see we've got some coming in already, and that's great. We'll be definitely able to answer those. So when we go to record and we press a playback, we see we have options here: cue list, submaster, chase, inhibitive, override, timecode. And the same options are here in the cue list directory, right? We've got cue list, chase, override, timecode, submaster, inhibitive. These are the different types of faders or playbacks inside of Onyx, because it could be a button, it could be a fader. So fader was actually bad terminology there. I shouldn't have said that. So far, we have recorded as a cue list. And a cue list is simply a playback where you are able to go ahead and basically, when you bring the fader up, you press play, you're going to see that cue playback, right? Let's do that quick, actually. So, we stop this guy, bring that fader up, we play. And with the default settings, when we press play, the cue fades in fully. As we bring the fader up and down, we get intensity control of those lights if the intensity of those lights is stored within that cue list. Okay, very important. And so that's how a cue list works, but we've got other types too. So if I, again, pull up my types here, next we've got the submaster type. The submaster type is an intensity-only type fader. If you've used older lighting consoles, like a conventional style lighting consoles where you had a bunch of submasters, it works just like that. For everybody who hasn't done that, let me fill you in. And so what the submaster means is it's an HTP or highest takes precedence type fader, okay? And so what that means, what that looks like is that if you take a light at 100%, you put it on that fader and you bring it to full, it's going to be at 100%. Even if there's other cue lists or other submasters that you bring up to say 20%, it's going to stay at 100% because with a submaster, the highest level takes precedence, takes the output, okay? And so these are common, people use these in TV a lot, people that are used to the old school consoles. If you're doing live music and stuff, you may or may not use them, but the option's there. That's the great thing about Onyx is, I always tell people when I'm teaching it, there are so many options and so many different ways you can do things. And you don't need to understand everything about the console and every little feature. It's helpful to learn about them, but what you need to understand is only, what you need to know to get your show done and what applies to you. Below submaster here, yellow here, is the inhibitive type fader. Now, an inhibitive type fader is like an anti-submaster, okay? And so an anti-submaster, basically, as I'm calling it, an inhibitive, is a fader that pulls back the level of the intensity of a light. And so the way that this works is you select some lights, you record them to an inhibitive fader, okay? And then that inhibitive fader must be up in order for there to be output from those lights, okay? As we bring that inhibitive down, the inhibitive itself isn't giving those lights any intensity. You've got to give the light intensity from somewhere else. Let's say you had that intensity in a regular cue list and it was at 80%. As you pull that inhibitive down from full, it's going to scale the output of the lights you stored to that inhibitive. And it's going to scale it based on, the percentage that it was at, the percentage of the inhibitive fader. As you bring that inhibitive down, it's going to bring that intensity level down. Very, very helpful in a lot of situations. I use a lot of inhibitives myself on shows. Next, we've got the chase type fader. And the chase fader is what it sounds like. Again, harkening back to the old school consoles. A chase is, you used to have, these little chaser functions. They were kind of funky, but they got the job done at the time. Now we've got better. And that is the chase cue list. A couple of great things about the chase cue list. One is that you build a bunch of cues on it, and each of those cues stand alone. There's no tracking, okay? And then the chase function, when you activate it, is just going to bounce between those cues. It's going to bounce through those cues, one cue after the other, chasing through them per se. Now, with the chase, there's a lot of controls built in which are really helpful. One thing, especially if you have an NX Touch or an M Touch or anything like that, or if you have function keys on your console or your sidebar, you can tap the tempo of chases, okay? And you can even do that so your tap tempo for chases is global so that all your chases listen to that tempo. So that no matter what the tempo is, you can tap it in, all your chases are going to match it. Super helpful. There's also other controls within the options for chases to go forwards, backwards, random, ping pong, to have different fades and in bumps between cues. There's actually a lot you can get into if you're going to use chases a lot. I recommend reading up on it in the manual and playing around with it. Below chase, we have purple, the override. Overrides are a great type of fader too. What do? An override type fader basically allows you to have a fader that, unlike the cue list, when you bring it up and down, that fader controls all of the parameters that are stored to that fader. So what does that look like? Well, if you put color on that fader, then as you bring the fader up and down, the color is going to be modified. It's going to be lesser or greater in the percentage of how you stored that, okay? And so that's super helpful there. Next, it's at a slightly higher priority than any other cue list, okay, than the regular cue list, rather, I should say. And so it's going to override. It's going to take over when you bring that up. And lastly, if you are interested as well, going in deeper, there is a function called Cue Blender within the override that allows you within that 0 to 100% path of that fader to actually put multiple cues within one fader. This could be multiple effects. This could be multiple positions, multiple colors. There's a lot of things you can do with it. It's really, really powerful once you understand how it works and start using it. So I recommend checking out the Cue Blender under override as well. Um, but overrides are great. And then last we have timecode. And the timecode fader is what it sounds like. It's basically a regular cue list, but it's listening for timecode, whether that be linear timecode or SMPTE coming through the jack on a console, or it could be MIDI timecode coming from a computer or some other source. You're able to track it. You're able to set your cues to be fired automatically once the timecode cue list is armed through that. If you know you need timecode, then you know you need it. If you don't know you need it, you might not need it. But timecode is just used when you're playing back. You're automating a light show to a video or an audio track or a DJ live on stage, a band, something like that are instances when you'll use timecode. Awesome, guys. So those are all the types that we're able to store. And so let's go ahead and take some more questions. Feel free to ask them here. I see I've got 4 questions open already, which is great. Now Chuck says, I'm back. Promote me again, please, to a panelist when you get a second. I don't know about that. No, I'm kidding. I'll find you in here, Chuck. Hopefully it's not an imposter. I'm sure it's not, but at the same time, I'm not checking your email, so oh, that'd be bad. Okay, I shouldn't give anybody ideas. And so let's answer any questions that we have so far. First question, guys. How do you disable the Grandmaster? You know, Chris, nobody's answered this yet. And so it might be in the settings. It might not be. Honestly, it's not something I've ever tried to do, which is what we run into on these webinars. People asking for things that I don't know about. If it's going to be anywhere, it would be in the menu. So quick menu, main menu. And it would be in one of these settings here in this show section probably. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's one in here. Somebody's typing. I'll check for one quick, or if Matthias chimes in or says something, that's all good. I don't know. I can't remember off the top of my head if we can disable the Grandmaster. You know, I've read the manual, but I don't remember if it's in there. And so I'm not seeing, oh, here it is. Yes, Grandmaster fader. I knew it. I thought it was in here. Under Cue settings, Grandmaster fader, enable or disable the Grandmaster. Boom, you can disable that. Also the button, which can be a flash or a blackout, you can turn that all off, which actually goes with that question that was asked earlier about putting a Grandmaster on an NX Touch, because then if you put your Grandmaster on the NX Touch as an inhibitive, you could then disable the real Grandmaster and life would be just good and dandy. Benoit said, after we make a preset, can we add a new fixture? And will that already made preset be available for the new fixture with its new ID? No, but we can. Let's talk about it. So what you're asking for, Benoit, basically is, can presets be what's called universal often? And, you know, some other consoles allow you to do that, and it's a great functionality. And I'm sure it's on the roadmap for Onyx, but we don't have it right now. What we can do is use the clone function. I know Matthias will go over it on one of his webinars if he hasn't already, the advanced one that's tomorrow. I can't remember if there's an official video on it. But basically cloning, we can go into patch. And once you've patched the fixture, you can clone it. So you take an existing fixture that's in all your presets and you say clone fixture right here. The basic gist of it is copy and then source at target. So source at target is basically how we refer to the way we type things in. And so copy, you would say 101 through 111, these DaVincis, right, that we've been working with. So copy 101 through 111 at, and then your new fixtures. Maybe they were 501 to 511, okay? And then you would go to clone after that. Once you enter that command, you would execute the commands, and it would literally copy all of the data, or you could choose cues, rather not cubes, presets and or groups. and you can clone those, okay? And it's going to copy everything from those source fixtures to those new fixtures. Once it does that, the new fixtures that you just patched will be fully usable with all your presets, especially if you choose only cues and presets, or groups and presets, but not cues. When you go to clone, then you would have it in all the presets, but none of your cues, and be able to add those in your show as you wish. Or you could bring it into all your cues, maybe make an inhibitive fader for just those new lights, and then you'd be able to control those separately intensity wise, but they'd automatically do whatever was in your show. So that's how you do that as well. Kevin Miles, how do I download or be able to use the capture visualization utility? So Kevin, you may or may not have been here when we started. I kind of went over it, but we'll just pull up a web browser here, bring it over. And so many web browsers, so little time. And so what we're going to do is go to support.obsidiancontrol.com. The download, this is just the capture demo file that matches with this show, not real paid capture. But I think that's what you're asking. We then go to support, and then there's a tab called training. Then you see about this little learn stage lighting guy. Nice guy. And then you've got the matching capture demo file right here. You'll see a number of files in this folder. I'll just walk you through that real quick. So we've got the C2P file. That's if you have capture installed. And then we have the exe file, which is a file that you can run on a Windows PC. And it'll run nonstop. You just can't edit it. Okay. So the actual capture file, you'll have to use that if you're on a Mac, because you can't do this standalone file on there. With the capture demo, it will work. You'll just have to reopen it every 90 minutes because you're using the demo of capture. It'll close. And then setting that up, we've gone over that already, but we can go over it just super quick because we've got a little bit of extra time here, since there's not quite as many people on this one as there have been on some of the last ones. We're just going to send it DMX from inside the console. And so we'll send it network DMX. If you're in a console or with an external computer, the network setup's going to be a little bit different. But we'll go to the quick menu to menu, network, under that Ether DMX, then SACN on the bottom. And a tab key works great on computers, by the way, through these. New feature, really awesome. Now we've actually got to edit this. See, I want to set universes 1 through 4. For most of you guys at home, I would just set it to your Wi-Fi adapter, and usually it just goes over your network, comes back into the computer, and it's fine, seen by capture. I'm using the Windows Loopback adapter, which is super helpful as well. You can Google how to install that. It only takes a few minutes. It changes in each version of Windows, but it's not too hard. You turn that on, press apply, boom. Then in the capture demo, you should see it basically black out when you open it. You can check window universes, and this window will show you which universes are attached, which aren't. I see I have universe 1 and 2. 3 hasn't shown up here. Usually restarting this file will make that happy because I wasn't sending it more than universe 1 before. Occasionally it just doesn't get happy, and usually rebooting my computer fixes that, or the file. But as I can see here, I just rebooted the file and it picked up on that 3rd universe. Notice I am streaming universe 1 through 4 here in Onyx. It's not showing a 4th one because I don't have anything patched, so there's no data. And the capture demo file and real capture generally pick up on streaming DMX if you have it running before you start capture. And so that's how you do that. Next question, and if you have any more questions, we've got some time for them, but we can also get to some at the end. So Kaskin says you could also make a queue list as HTTP, right? And so you can make, trying to think about this, about exactly what your question is. So if we right click on this or go to the queue list options, we can go to the function assignments and make the fader HTTP. I can't remember off the top of my head. We'll just test it here because this is something that I haven't tried before. Is if I record a second fader with those same lights, will it then take over? So now if I bring this fader up just like 25%, press play. Yeah, it's going to take over. And so it's not truly an HTTP fader in that sense, because the other fader was able to take over at the highest, didn't truly have precedence there. So you can set the fader to HTTP like that, but the way to really make it, a actually HTTP fader is to use submasters. That's how it's designed to work. What I usually tell people, maybe this is the boat that you're in, Kaskin, is that sometimes people get into a new console such as Onyx, and you try to make it do something in a way that another console does something. Okay, I know that wasn't very descriptive. And sometimes sometimes it can be better to just step back and instead of trying to make it work like another console that you've used, taking just an extra minute to say, okay, how is this console designed to use? And you might find, okay, there's a way to do this. It's different than I used to work, but it gets me the same result. And then it's a better thing to do. And in this case, using a submaster is definitely what you would want to do as well. Kevin Miles asks, would timecode be able to take a cue from like ProPresenter? So off the top of my head, I don't think ProPresenter can do timecode. So timecode would be for a consistent video. Now, how would you trigger from ProPresenter? I've done this a fair amount. I would use MIDI macros, okay? Of course, in ProPresenter 6 or below, if you're on a Mac, you can get those modules to add MIDI. In ProPresenter 7, the MIDI's included. And so we use MIDI. You're saying OSC question mark. I don't think ProPresenter 7 can do OSC, but it can send MIDI. And so what we do is we use the Apple, if we're on a Mac, the Apple network MIDI, use the RTP MIDI on the Windows side, and that'll come right into Onyx. I've done that before. Or if you're on Windows, you can just do it within the same machine or use the RTP MIDI program. It's a free program for sending MIDI over a network. And you're able to do that. No worries. That's just how I've been able to make ProPresenter work with Onyx myself and for students. And so that is what we got there. I don't think it can do OSC. Oh, MSC. No, ProPresenter uses MIDI notes. You can Google it and see if they changed it in 7. But in the past, it's always been MIDI notes and not MIDI show control from ProPresenter. And so you can Google it, dang them. Oh, man. West Row says, from a live band lighting stance, the NX Touch is very customizable as far as buttons, banks and buttons. What is your optimal setup for using the fader banks versus buttons? Like faders on chases, buttons on moves, etc. Well, Westro, that is a whole can of worms. There's a lot of ways to do it, but generally, when I'm programming something, and this is more of a style question than a like console question, but we can answer it. And generally, what I like to do is if I think I want variable control of it, whether that be intensity control or variable control via an override, I put it on a fader. If I don't feel like I need variable control of something, if it's just a color, just a position, etc., just a gobo, then I don't need a fader-based control of that. The fader's just going to stay up at full the whole time. Then I'll put that on a button. If I run out of buttons first, then I can put some of those on faders, sure. But usually I have enough things that I want to put on faders, whether that be different effects speeds and stuff like that, as well as intensities, color chases, stuff like that, that I usually run out of faders long before buttons. And so that's basically kind of how to lay it out. There's a lot more info, a lot more. I could talk about that for a few hours. And I do places, but not right now. So let us know, guys. Just anybody else, I think we're good. I don't think we have any other questions. I was just reading Matthias's little thing about MIDI show control, but I don't think it does. And so that made me laugh. Any other questions, guys, that we have so far? Yeah, if you Google ProPresenter 7 MSC, it just autocorrects to Mac. They're like, don't you mean that? But then if you do MIDI notes, you get a whole bunch of articles, and that's what I've done before, is just use the MIDI notes. I mean, I guess it is stuck in the 70s, but at the same time, I don't know, people use it out of Ableton and stuff too that are triggering stuff. And so, kind of is what it is. All right, guys, back into our lovely webinar. Thank you guys for hanging out today. do stretch, guys. Make sure if you haven't already stretched, move your eyes off that screen. You know, it's not good for you to be looking at a screen. I'm actually going to stand up real quick. MIDI was 1981. Oh my goodness. It's all before me, but that's okay. All right, so stretch, look away from your screen for like a second because that's good for your eyes. And this is going to be our last section. We're going to talk about effects and give you some examples, and then just open it up for questions after that. Looks like we'll wrap up a little bit earlier today because we've got less people in here, which is great. Which means, hey, more time for questions, offshoots, whatever, talking about effects a little more, whatever we want to talk about. That's the beautiful thing about this. We're here and we're live. So let me grab a quick voice here, quick little stuff for my throat, what is this stuff called? Tea? And we're going to work with effects, guys. So to prepare for this, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop all of my cue lists so that all the lights are off. We're starting from blank again. If you're on a console or you're on an NX Touch or anything like that, you have a snap and release button, and you can press those together. There is a nuanced difference between pressing snap first and then holding snap and pressing release versus holding release and pressing snap. The former, just out of curiosity, is the former is, I shouldn't watch the chat, is holding snap and pressing release is a really cool function because it actually brings down the intensity of the lights first and then releases everything else, position, color, gobo, etc. Whereas a release and then snap is like other consoles, you know, full release or off, where everything just goes off. You watch colors go out, you watch positions move. It's not quite as pretty. And so I definitely prefer snap and then release, but both are there if you're on a console. If not, just stop all the cues, or restart the program, whatever. You don't have to restart the program. And so let's build our first effect. The effects engine inside of Onyx is similar to other consoles, but also unique in many ways. And I think you'll find as you get into it that there's a lot you can do with it. It is really powerful. Some of the more advanced features take a little bit of time to understand, but you know what? We got some time. We'll learn about it here. And so the general principle that goes on basically is that you have a parameter or multiple of a light that is at a certain point. We call that the base, okay? Then the effects engine is just going to go ahead and it's going to modulate, basically. It's going to move that parameter from the base, and it'll come back to the base and it'll go to the other side, and etc. And when we move that around and when we let the console move that and then do some cool stuff with it, we can get some stuff that looks really interesting. So let's go ahead, select our Artiste Da Vinci's here. And we're just going to go ahead for this first example and let's just leave them at 0. We're going to go ahead now, press intensity, and then press effects. Now, it's always important, and we can actually talk more about like fanning and stuff if we have time, because we had extra time today, and I'll actually write that in my notes for next week. Just if we have time, you know, in the earlier sections, we can spend a little more time going over things such as fanning. Because when we have a smaller group, when there's not 200 people in the room, then we have less questions, therefore more time. And so back where we were, effects. Okay, so we first want to select the parameter on the left here, and then we go over to the right, such as effects. And then when we do that, it says right here, swing on intensity. And so this lets us know, this clues us in, hey, you're working with intensity. This is what we're doing. Okay, guys? And so that's what we're going to work with first. Now we see swing, speed, mode, and multiplier. These are our different controls for this effect, the first controls that we're going to use. So swing, the first one, is how far off of that base point is the effect going to move. Now in this example, the base point is 0. Okay, these lights are off. And I'm just going to take the swing up to 200% because 100% would actually basically have the base in the middle and go above at 50 and below at 50 in this example. And we can actually see that on the mode control, just jumping ahead. The base is the black line, okay? And then the white is the shape. And so some of these shapes only go over the base, but a lot of them incorporate above and below, with the base being the center point. Before we get to mode though, let's talk about speed. Speed is what it sounds like. It's the speed that the effect's gonna run at. If we dial that up to about 45%, we start to see our lights doing the effect. It's happening, we see what's going on, and we're able to watch that, okay? We can now see the effect that our speed has on these lights. If I pop this side out, by the way, the last toggle right here is the view of the effect waveform. And we can see the effect runs, it goes over, and then it goes under, actually. And we're able to go ahead and basically do that as well. Gonna go under. So we've got swing, we've got speed. Boy, the questions keep getting answered. Oh, there's 600 attendees. See, I'll just check the chat. Oh, of course, there's 600 people in this room. No, there's not. That should be obvious because there's not that many questions, and it's okay. Small groups are fine because then the individual people get to ask more questions. Why don't you call Pro Presenter? Actually, I probably know some people that know some people there, but I'm curious. Well, I guess, okay, we'll talk about that. I'm kidding. Sorry, I shouldn't look at the chat. So swing speed, then we set the mode, the shape we want it to take. For this one, we're just going to leave it where it's at. And then I'm going to ignore the chat. Stop talking to me. And then multiplier is a speed multiplier. It's especially useful with LEDs when using color or intensity. Sometime you might want to make a chase, especially with faster paced music that can go faster than speed at full, which is pretty fast, but as you can see, it's not super fast. So you can dial in that multiplier to make it just absurd. And so, but the multiplier can do other things actually, because if you have a lower BPM, you could set some lights to use a multiplier, others to not. There's a lot you can do with it, and it's there for you. Once we get it looking how we like, we say, oh, but all the lights are doing this at the same time. That's not all that exciting. Well, if we go down to effects timing here, we have two great options. We have wave per X and step per X. Oh no, I'm being poked. I shouldn't look at it. And wave and step are two ways to basically distribute the effect across the lights. And so let's, for example, first use wave. You want to use either wave or step. They don't work together. It's either or. A wave of 10 basically takes that effect that we just had when it was off. And it was, well, wasn't that fun? Guys, let me know in the chat where I dropped off. It's interesting. It's like Zoom has done this, I think, every week. Has it done it every week? Literally at the same time. Like, I'm always in this point at effects. It's ridiculous. So I'm going to pull up the chat. I'm going to pull the Q&A back up. We're right back. It's like literally, because it cuts out, I think, for you guys about a second before I see Zoom just like not crash, because Windows would tell me about a crash, but it just closes and then it starts to restart. It's like, I don't get it. But we're here. We're good. We've got everything back. We've got everyone back. And if it's like every other week, this will be the one time that it did it, and then it's good. And so, oh, that's an interesting point, Chuck. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've got like a pretty slamming PC here. I'm not gonna like, you know, and even with the effect running, like it's not killing my computer. It could be the network signal, but it's like graphics, memory, CPU. None of them are really working that hard. Anyways, but yeah, it's interesting that it might be peak time for Zoom. Anyways, wave and step. So I'm going to start over. Just, you can do wave or step. You get to choose one of them. You probably heard that. You can't use both at the same time because they're just different ways that you are able to distribute the effect to offset it. So if I set the wave to 10, I'm able to go ahead and it's now taken that effect that was when it's off, happening at the same time for every light, and it spreads it out across all 10 lights because I've got 10 fixtures selected, okay? But it gets more interesting than that. If I take it down to 5, let's say, this is where the maths come in. It's now happening twice across all my fixtures, okay? Let's look at step for a second. If we set step to 10, each fixture runs the effect on its own, and it basically repeats every 10. So if I take it to 5, 2 fixtures are doing it at the same time because I've got 10 fixtures in total. And so step works a lot of times for kind of chasing type looks. It can be very interesting. And it just depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Sometimes step is going to be what works best. I find that wave works really great a lot of times, but it really depends on the needs of your show, what you're trying to do. They're different. It gives you more control. It gives you interesting and different ways to get control of things. So once we've got that and we like how it looks, we're happy with it, we can go ahead then and actually let's do one more thing. Since we've got time and Zoom is, doing its 1:15 crash. Let's go ahead and make this symmetrical. And so I mentioned when we were going over the grouping tools earlier that we find the grouping tools in effects, but we hadn't gotten there yet. And it's actually right here. It's actually this last encoder wheel. So the last half of the grouping tool, the fan every X, fan block of X, fan mirror group, blah, blah, blah. This is using fan and effects to actually affect that grouping, okay? If we popped out the grouping tools pop-up, that would be having the fan effects switch on, okay? And let's choose for this one, fan mirror per X. And we can set that to 2, and then we can go ahead and set our wave. It doesn't actually apply till we set that wave after we set the fan per 2, and we'll set that to 5. And we now get, hey, yes, Will's been looking for this, awesome. Yeah, so bringing the grouping tools in with the effects is where you get really interesting. And so now we like what we've got. We'll press record. We'll put it on fader 7 here. We'll call it intensity effects, and we will make it an override type fader. Awesome. And so once we've done that, we can press clear twice to fully clear our programmer. And if we bring up that override to full, we see the effect play back. Awesome. We'll get back to that in a second. First, though, let's build a color chase, a color effect. We'll select our same friendly lights again, these 10 Artiste Da Vinci's. And this time we'll go to color. Let's go ahead as well and go to the first bank right here. And then just bring up the spots fader. Actually, rather than bring it up here, let's copy it. Copy, press that fader, that playback. Go to our new bank. And then we can press any of the buttons here. One thing to note with copying banks, you notice here in the command line, it's saying playback fader 1.1. So first that 1, the first one is the bank, the dot, then is the space for then the individual spot. So I could press any of these, like if I wanted to go to 3 here, we're on bank 3, spot 3. But I could type 3 dot, type in my command line here, 3. Hey now. Gotta have the right window in focus. What did I do wrong? Whatever. I can type 3.3 there. I'm not sure why the focus wasn't quite right there, but that's okay. And then I copy it. I can bring that up. Now we can see our lights. That was the point there. So we'll then select our Artiste Da Vinci's if we didn't already. Go to color. Maybe we bring the cyan to half just for fun. Go to magenta, then go to effects. Because we last pressed magenta before going to effects, we see that we have the multiplier on magenta. And so now we can build our effect. It's going to work just like last time. So we dial in that swing. Maybe for this one, we do, we'll just do maximum. Dial in a speed till we like how it looks. Might be a tad hard to see. Yeah, you can see it though. Set the mode. I'm actually going to go down to mode effects 7. This on off with no fade. It's just a hard on and off. And then we'll go to effects timing, set our wave. Maybe for this one, we do 3. Or maybe I do step for this one. You can always turn off the wave and then try the step. Yeah, we'll just do a step of 2. go back to the effects and speed it up a little. And then we'll record this to a new playback. I'm choosing number 8. Awesome. Now we're going to go give a name such as color effects, descriptive, helpful, and entertaining. And then we can press clear twice. Of course, we can check it by bringing up the fader. Boom, it's good to go. Awesome. Now that we've talked about intensity and we've talked about color, let's make a movement effect. So we'll select our Artiste Da Vinci's again. That's the first thing I always select in your lights. And we'll go to pan tilt and we'll go to effects. And now it looks a little bit different. Why does it look different? Well, it looks different because we're using pan and tilt together to make our movement effect. Depending on your needs and the way you program, you may or may not want to do this. You might want to work with only pan. You might want to work with only tilt. If that's the case, just press the cog in the corner, go to pan tilt combo, switch that off. It will work like any other effect with swing speed mode and multiplier. But for now, we're going to work with them together because often that makes sense because, you know, pan and tilt does go together a lot. A question just came in from Will about a rate master. I will show you that in a couple minutes once I finish what I'm planning to go through here. So, because we can definitely do that. And so we'll set our swing pan. Maybe we just do like 13%. Swing tilt, we'll do a higher tilt. Bring in a speed. And then we have our figure. And figure's a lot like mode, but it encompasses both the pan and the tilt, as you can see here. So the default one is just this line. It's okay. But as we scroll down, we get more complex and more interesting shapes, such as circles, and then it just gets crazy as we go down the line. And so well, today I'm feeling like this is a good one. So we'll go to our timing. Now, one tip here, when I do effects timing on like a ballyhoo like this, I like to choose a number like 7 that's not divisible into my total number of fixtures, which is 10 in this case, because it gives you kind of a random look to it. There are other ways to get random effects, but this is a quick and easy way to do so. And so I like it a lot. So we'll do that. We got to look at how we like it. We can now record that, put it on a fader. We can see, I didn't mention this before, but I'll just call this ballyhoo. We can see override is selected. It's got that yellow box around it. So if we pressed enter, it would just store it as an override. And the reason why it chose override is because that's what we used last. So whatever you used last is always going to be what shows up there, and you'll be good to go. Awesome. So record that. Oh, I gotta actually press enter and record that thing. Clear. And then we can see that it works. And already, even before we go and make our 4th effect in just a minute from one of the pre-built effects, we can see something interesting here. If we go, actually, let me go to the virtual console window. Pop it up right here. For top of, whoops, not that button, that button. We'll go ahead to our virtual console fader. And we can see here, if I bring up these different faders, we can really easily and interestingly get a lot of different looks just by moving these faders around. By bringing the different effects up, different amounts, you can really get a lot of interesting and different effects. I'll need to pull that submaster down, of course, to see the intensity effect. So we weren't even using that up until this point. And then we can bring in these different effects. You know, I've got that intensity effect going, but maybe I bring up the submaster to 50%, and then the effect is only basically affecting from 50% to 100. You know, I could bring it back out, whatever. You can see, even with just 3 faders here, we get a lot of different options. And as we bring up each fader individually, we notice that as we bring it down, it decreases in speed, it decreases in swing and overall level of the effect as well. And so you get those controls on that fader. In a minute, we're going to show Will how that applies to making an effects speed fader to be able to have a rate master basically over your effects. There's a couple ways we can do that. And so we'll get back to that in just a minute. Remind me if I don't hit it. But what I want to do first is go to the effects program window. And in this window, we happen to have these effects macros right here, the effects macros window. And in the effects macros window, we have pre-built effects that utilize the effects link, which basically ties multiple parameters together in an effect so that they happen in sync in the way that you recorded them. Some of those can be color effects because, of course, with any color parameter, we generally have multiple of them, right? Red, green, blue, cyan, magenta, yellow, etc. But we also have things like the pan, tilt, fall with color, with intensity. And so this is where pan and tilt and intensity are working together. Let's just go ahead. We'll use one of the pan tilt ones today. Select some lights like the Artiste Da Vinci's. And then let's choose number 28. Pan, tilt, fall, dimmer, iris. Okay. And so once you hit that and you see it fire, you can see this is basically an effect where the lights all start up at the bottom of their tilt range. And they fade in, and then they come down, they do a little move around, and then they go back and they disappear. Okay. Looks interesting, but we can make it better. So the thing to know about the effects macros is that they are universal to any type of light. And so they don't apply any effects timing. They don't apply any wave or step because that would inherently make it not applicable to different amounts of lights. So we've got to set the wave or step. So we could do that here. Let's just go with 4 this time. And now we can see we have something much more interesting because the different lights, they still stay in sync within the individual light, right? The dimmer and the movement and the iris work together in the same way that they did before. We're setting that wave, we're setting that timing to all 3 of those per light at the same time, okay? Same as if we modify the speed of it, maybe we want it to go faster or slower. When we do that and a link is on here or here, anywhere, when that link is on, when it's blinking, we're working on the speed of multiple channels together. Once we get it looking nice, we decide we like it, we can just go ahead and record that. Now we'd adjusted the speed, so we could record it back into the effects macros, and that's going to record just like a preset, just like a group. It's going to record a new effects macro with the information for one fixture, basically, no offset, no timing to it, no effects wave or step. But I'm going to record this to the fader, just like any other effect. And we'll call this effects macro, enter. And then we can bring that up, press clear twice. And now we're running that off our fader. And so that's a really powerful way to also be able to store effects in the effects macros. And with link, which again, we could probably go into a little bit if we have more time. But with link, you can tie things together. And a lot of these macros do tie things together to make interesting effects. Now, Will asked, and this is a good place to talk about this, about effects rate masters. First and foremost, if you've built your effects, all of them already, you can go here to rate on the encoder wheels. And we have 4 rates here. We'll talk about all of them quick because we're here. Just going to turn off links so I don't forget about it. The first rate we have is called the global fade speed. And what the global fade speed is it's a fade time override for every fade time in every cue in your show. So if I would take that to 50%, a cue that used to take, that was set at 1 second would take 2 seconds, okay? If I go back to default and then take it to 200%, that cue that was set at 1 second would now happen in half of a second, okay? And that's over every cue in your show. Next, we have global effects speed. That's one way to get an effect speed like Will's talking about, that we can shift as we show you, slow down or speed up all of the effects in the show. Sometimes you want to do that. Sometimes you might not want to do it with all the effects in your show, okay? Then we've got the selected cue list speed. This is for the cue list that's selected, the one that's got the white box around it. That's going to set the speed for that one, just like the fade speed. It's the fade speed for that cue list. And last, we have the live time speed. The live time is very special because this is the speed that we're going to bring things in and out of the programmer, and also in and out of blind mode, which is activated with the preview key here. So just as a quick demo of live time, then we'll talk about an effect speed fader. just a quick demo of lifetime. If I select these Artiste Da Vinci's, and then I go to intensity and bring it to full here, it happens instantly. Let me clear that and set a lifetime of a second. Now I'll do it again. It fades in over 1 second. Not only that, let's clear it again. This time I'm going to go into preview, which is blind programmer mode. It goes into blind down here. Okay, just as a quick demo, I'll grab my Da Vinci's, take them to full, give them a position. You know, there's a band on stage, yellow, fuse washes, full. I'm getting ready for the chorus. We'll take them to, oh, this is not in the color. Sure, white, color chorus, whatever. That full, okay. I've made a look. I've got it ready in my programmer. The band's getting ready. Now I can press preview and all that stuff fades in at the live time. I can press preview again to bring it in blind or just clear twice to clear it out, and it's all going to respect the live time. Now, let's actually, before we talk about effect speeds, I don't want to get carried away. So we've got half an hour left. We've kind of covered what I cover in these webinars, but I'm happy to take questions. All right. And so happy to do that. And so let's go through and just talk about support. Just talk about, okay, after this webinar, when you've got more questions, where do you go? Because that's very important. So support. Where do you find support after today's webinar? Well, you can come back next week. But no, a few great places. One, obsidiancontrol.com is the main hub for all things Onyx. If you scroll down below the big banner, you'll see this here, where you can download the latest software, update your fixture library. If you've got new fixtures, there's not a profile for them, check that library first. You can also request fixtures here. And the Onyx library guy, Ofer, he is awesome. He is fast. He is good. Sometimes he gets overwhelmed with a lot of requests, sure. But compared to a lot of other consoles on the market, he's very quick. You can then visit the user guide, okay? Oh, I forgot about that. So in Onyx, guys, I think I touched on this. The manual is in the software as well as at support.obsidiancontrol.com, where I just showed you that link. But if we go to our quick menu in Onyx, there's also the help manual here. I've read the manual once or twice. It's okay. The guy they get to do it, you know, they could do better. Next, we've got the watch. But seriously, I do help them with the manual now. And if you guys ever see anything in there or if something's missing, let us know. We can get it changed in the next go around. But there's a lot in there. A lot of good stuff, a lot of how-tos, a lot of examples. And then we've got the YouTube channel with the videos that have the tutorial videos for Onyx. You know, they're from just a couple versions ago. And I can tell you most of what you're going to do is going to translate into the new version there. There's mostly just additions, you know, to the new version. So the videos are great too. Then we get the Facebook group, guys. The Facebook group, as it says here, is not a support channel, but it's a great place on Facebook, the Onyx user group. Come and join us if you're not already in there. It's just a place to chat, to show pictures of your show, ask stylistic questions, etc. See what other people are doing, you know, etc. If you have like a legit like problem, like something doesn't work right, there's a bug, whatever, then you want to go to the forum, which is under support here on the main website. There's a forum right there. And you want to ask it there. That's where the developers actively look. It's searchable. Facebook is so bad about searchableness and just the ability to find things later that the forum is a much better place for that. Thank you, Chuck, for pasting links. And then we have live trainings for Elation. Obviously not right now, but once we're able to leave our homes again and, you know, show up and be in groups together, there will be more of these. And Elation does some great 2-day training events. I've had the opportunity to help take part in some of them and help teach them. And they sometimes teach all Onyx, Onyx and Capture, all sorts of things. And they're definitely, you know, if you want to just dive deep, you know, and really focus for 2 days, ask any questions you want, you know, you can really learn a lot in that time. And so we'll open it back up for questions. We've got a few in here. The first, I'll just answer an easy one that came in from Alf, then I'll get back to Will's. That's so terrible, Will. I'm being so bad to you. But if you have other questions, guys, ask them now. But so Alf said, how can I manage the color on the NX Touch buttons? So the color on the NX Touch buttons, Alf, is it's based on if the cue is playing or if it is, if the cue's playing or if the cue is just active or, not actively playing something or fading back. So it's green if it's playing, if it's not playing, rather, if it's been played, and it's red if it's actively crossfading. And there's not like a customization of that or anything available, just for, confusion's sake. So Will asked, I'm going to answer your question, Will. Affects speed fader. So what we're going to do, I'm just going to make this full screen again, is effects program window is the best place to do this, is we just want to make an override that only has effects speed on it, okay? Because that's the cool thing about overrides is as we bring that fader up and down, it's going to move those values. And we want to do that first in building our show, because if you build feed into your speed into your effects, I'm trying to say that 10 times fast. If you build feed into your effects, it will override the effect speed fader. So the best way to do it, the cleanest way, is to just grab your lights first, by type, turn on effects link, and then go ahead to intensity in effects, turn the speed to whatever level you want. I'm just going to use maximum, pan tilt effects, speed to maximum, whatever you would want the max speed to be, cyan, speed to full. There's a few ways to do it. You grab all the parameters you want the speed of, go ahead to programmer, you can see, okay, I've set for this particular fixture, effects on pan tilt, cyan, and intensity. Great. Maybe those are the attributes I want in this speed fader. So then I can just go record this as an override, name it effect speed. And I want to do this before I record my effects, because then I can bring this up and say I bring it up to 65%, and then I'm building an effect. So then I grab my lights, I go to intensity, I go to effects. Speed here is already at 65%. And as I move this, see that value is not being brought into the programmer, but I'm working with it. And so then, as long as I don't touch speed when I build my effect, it will only be controlled by the speed fader. The cool thing about that, of course, is that you can have an effect speed fader for everything, sure. But you can also have an effect speed fader that is only for intensity. Maybe effect speed only for, maybe it's for all the parameters, but only on the Artiste Da Vinci's. And then the fuse washes, you have a separate speed fader. Or the way I usually, you're an MA guy, so you know what you're doing, maybe, but I should make that blanket observation. But, if you know how to use MA, you're obviously using it probably on a professional level. But also what I like to do, I like to do one for like intensity and color and, effects like that. And then I do a second speed fader for pan tilt. That's my flavor of the day. But you can set, that's the cool thing about this architecture, is you can set it up however you want. And so, yeah. Let's see. So Kevin Miles said, I was building a demo test show the other day, very basic. I started adding cues to my cue list, and then I discovered virtual playbacks. Can you explain virtual playlist? Okay, Kevin, you must have come in late, I'm going to guess, because we kind of went over this, but we can go over it again. And that's fine, because, people got life to do, but we did go over this already earlier on. Kevin also asked if we have access to this webinar to rewatch, and that's a Matthias question. I did press the record button at the start of today, but ultimately it's his content, not mine. And so that's his choice there. I'll let him answer that. But so your first question, Kevin, if anybody else has questions, that's great too. But so your first question, virtual playlist. So we've got a couple terms here that are important. You're talking about cue list, virtual cue list, okay? All cue lists in Onyx really are virtual cue lists, okay? So whether I store my cue list, there's a number of places I can store them. I can store them on the playbacks on the bottom of the screen, the fader-based playbacks. I can store them to the playback buttons, or as it's called in the playback page. No, it's also called playback buttons there. No, it's called just playbacks in the DJ page. I knew it was called something different somewhere. You also have these playback buttons. Now, whether you're on a fader or a button, either way, it's a playback. And you put cue lists onto those playbacks. Now, the cue list ultimately are referenced in the cue list directory. The playbacks are just a place to stick them. So whether it's a button, whether it's a fader, whether it's on hardware, whether it's just on the screen, it's all the same thing. And that's a beautiful thing. You can move them around from one to the other, copy them, delete them from one to the other. Doesn't matter because they're all the same thing. They're all any playback control, whether it be a button, fader, or otherwise, is running the same type of cue list. They're all the same thing. Okay. The virtual playbacks or the playback buttons are simply ones that are only on screen. They don't have a physical hardware attached to them on any of the consoles. But other than that, same thing. Let's see. Red link and effects are blinking your show. Explain. Yeah, that's effects link. We talked about that a couple minutes ago. That's a bit of a deeper topic, probably for another day for like Mencius's webinar. But that's where we're going to, we just went over that when we made this effects macro cue list a little bit. That's where we're going to take multiple parameters together and build an effect with them and have the speed linked and have them synchronized. And so that's what we turn that on for. And then we turn it off when we're not using it. But yeah, that link there or the button here blinking is literally the same thing. It's just indicating to us that that is on. Next question. Chase Dangle says, is there a way to color correct fixtures if I have 8 of the same fixtures before we're bought at a different time and have a different color when mixing RGBW? So when I use the color picker, they are the same. Okay, Chase, I'm going to try to talk you out of using the color picker here. And folks, if there are more questions, feel free to ask them because we can totally go up to the hour or a little later with this webinar or until my voice goes all the way. But yes and no. Okay. So yeah, when you buy LED fixtures at different times, especially from less expensive models, or if you have fixtures from different brands, you're going to see when you select colors in the color picker, they're not all going to match. They're not all going to match the color picker, etc. Okay, but who cares? Why should you not care? Well, I'll tell you what. So the color picker is always just an approximation. No light is going to match this exactly because lights don't give consoles exact information about what color they're producing. There's people trying to make that technology, but we're not there yet. Okay, this is DMX, guys. It's a little simpler than that. And so what you're going to do, basically, is you always want to make presets. Always, always, always for your color. Okay, so you'll take the first group of lights. You'll make them blue. You can use the color picker or the parameters. Doesn't matter how you get there. And you'll record that into the blue preset. Then you'll take your next set of lights. You make them blue. You try to make them look as close to the same as you can. Especially with some LEDs, sometimes it's really hard to match up a certain color, especially blue. Can be awkward. But you get as close as you can. You record, put that on top of the blue, merge that into the blue preset. Okay. Now, when you select either set of lights and put them in that blue preset, they turn a matching blue. Now, there's not like a calibration to make it calibrated to the color picker. And truth be told, I don't even think that's something they'd want to add, simply because one, people would really mess things up with that and it would get crazy. Two, you don't want to use the color picker to generate colors and put those directly into cues. You really, really want to go to the preset first so that one, colors will be consistent. Every time you call for the color blue in your show, it's going to look the same. And you can have, 10 shades of blue if that's what you're into. But two, that's going to allow you to update every blue in your show later. Every cue where you use blue later will be able to be updatable if you use the preset to make that cue. And so when you're going to make the cue, you want to select the lights, put them in the preset, record that to a cue. If you put them in a preset and then touch the color picker and then record that into a cue, you're not recording the preset anymore. Okay. So as much as we like the color picker, truth be told, I hate the color picker, but as much as we like the color picker, don't rely on it for building your cues. And now you can calibrate to it, but I hope you can understand why it makes sense not to try to calibrate to it, because you really, really want to use presets. And that will calibrate things to each other, and that's how the console is actually meant to work. Simone asked, how do I how do I do if I want to create a color effect with an LED fixture? Okay, let's pull something up here. With 3 colors, white, green, and red that alternate in a wave. Well, I'd build them as a chase. Um, truth be told, right now, that is using specific colors and making an effect is tough, especially if you want to alternate from point A to point B to point C. One place to start, just looking at stuff like this, is to use the, let's just turn these on at full. Yeah. Clear everything out quick since I had it doing stuff. Grab the Artista Da Vinci's that full. I know they're not an LED unit, but they'll work because they've got color mixing. And using the effects macros, whoops, I just went to a menu, like this green blue wave. And this will show you how you can use an effect with linking across multiple colors. Let me just resize this window. It keeps getting bigger. Ah, that's better. Because it is a little bit difficult. I'm with you on that. But using the effects linking, you can basically set up, okay, a swing for red and a swing for blue, and a swing for green, red, green, and blue. Did that out of order. And you can set those up and start to get something that looks approximately right. Getting exact colors that you want is difficult. I'm not going to lie about that. Okay. Especially if they're not, derivatives of red, green, and blue at full. What I would do, honestly, for that is I usually just make a chase. I find that quicker and easier. So that is my recommendation there. And so, yeah, guys, that's about the webinar for today. If you do have more questions, hey, we're here for you. I'm just playing around with this a little, but when you're in Effects Link 2, you can turn Effects Link off and then go in and modify individual channels, such as the swing. Okay, now cyan was in there. Now it's not. Maybe I turn the link back on. Maybe I then go to yellow and I go to effects. Yep, it's on there, but I want to go to magenta next. And I bring in a swing on magenta. And I could set that up. And so what I'd be able to do then is just set the effects timing differently. And then go back to, where was I? Cyan was that what I used? No, yellow. And then go to effects and set a different offset, different wave. Get it looking a little bit different. And so now it's kind of doing a wave of 3 colors that I'm working with. And then I could turn effects link back on if I needed to. Basically, and then go ahead and adjust that speed of all of them together. And they stay in sync. And I get a 3-color chase wave thing. But it's not, it's tough. I would say if you want specific colors at this point, you got to make a chase. That's kind of how it works. Or use Dylos. We haven't even talked about Dylos today because this is the basics webinar. But Dylos is the pixel mapping engine, guys. Okay, Joy Brown, that's a great question. Hey, when can we get Chuck Dillingham on to do a webinar about the elation fixtures, particularly the Artista range? Or Matthias or whomever. I just threw Chuck under the bus because I know he knows a lot about them. But yeah, Joy, I'm glad you've enjoyed that. That's in the chat, but if Chuck or Matthias wants to mention something about that or write, no, Chuck, you do know a lot about these fixtures. You're smart, dude. I like it. That would be totally, hey, maybe something they're totally up to doing. Oh, good times, good times, good times. Let me store this effect so I have it. Good deal, guys. Well, hey, it was great to have everybody on here today. I'll hang out for the last few minutes. I see a number of people on here. We're here. If there's more questions, ask them in the questions tab, and we'll answer them. If not, hey, have a great day. It's actually sunny right now where I am. I don't know if it is where you are. It's been sunny, but earlier today it was most definitely not sunny. And so thank you all for joining us today. Really, it has been a blast. It's been fun teaching you, and I've been fun hanging out. It's been a good time. Awesome. Picassos are your favorite, and you're either in Canada, the UK, or Australia because you spelled favorite with the U, and that's great. Thanks, everybody. Is it supposed to get nasty tonight? Oh, I saw there was some rain. See, my wife watches the weather, and so I don't, because she tells me if anything bad's going to happen. Yeah, so Simone, so as you asked before, you can't select 3 colors and make a 3-color effect. That's a limitation of the effects engine as of right now inside of Onyx. Not that it couldn't change later, but Simone, you can't just select 3 and make an effect. The best you can do is go ahead and save that. Do it as a chase. Sorry, I lost my train of thought reading things. Yep, no problem. Belfast, Ireland, awesome, awesome, good deal. All Irish people are great. I was gonna say I've got friends who are with the band Risky Business there, and they use Onyx. I don't know if you're one of them. You might be somebody else. I don't know where they are in Ireland. I'm the worst. But yeah. Oh, I see. You were talking to Chuck. Oh, awesome. See, Chuck, he's good. He's good. Good deal. Awesome, guys. Yeah, got any other questions, whatever, we're here. If not, that's great too. I see there's still a number of people here. 2,000 still in here, to quote Matthias. And so if any of the 2,000 people still in the room have questions, we're here for you. And if not, we'll just hang out for a couple minutes. No worries. Actually, random question for Chuck or anybody else who's been on multiple of these. How does my microphone sound today? I'm just curious. Compared to usual, I am borrowing a microphone from a friend, and it's a more expensive microphone than I've used before. Just curious if anybody's noticed a difference from other weeks. Honestly, I'm going to sit down and listen to some recordings and decide if I really like it or not. All right, the question of the day from Matthias is, does this come as a recording when it ends? I do not know. It's been asked a bunch of times. And it's not my content to distribute, so I will leave that to Matthias to answer. Well, what does it depend on? That's what I just don't know. Why is it that only the NX2 and NX4 owners get a free capture license and the NX Wing owners don't? Well, obviously, you guys probably know I don't work for Relation directly. I contract with them. But, capture, even the solo edition, is a $400 license or 400 euros. It's a little bit more. And for an NX Wing, I mean, even if you were paying full internet cost, which you should call a dealer, you could probably get a better deal, especially if you know a dealer. It's $2,400, and so that $400, or it's 400 euros, so it's actually more in dollars, is a pretty good chunk of that cost that Elation has to pay, to include it. I mean, true, they probably have some kind of deal with Capture where they're not paying the full same price that we all are paying for it. Okay, I get that. But at the same time, it's too high of a cost to just give it away for free. I think it's generous already that within NX2 you get Capture solo, I think, and with a 4 you get duo or quad. That's great. That's generous. They didn't have to do that, but they chose to, and I think that was super nice. Especially that it's a full upgradable license. But don't feel left out as an NX Wing owner, because honestly, I mean, I saw this post on Facebook the other day. And that's a good point. Chuck said, if you're buying the Wing and Capture at the same time, you could probably get a better deal than if you bought them separate. Talk to a dealer. That's always a good answer. But, I mean, gosh, with the cost of the Wing, I mean, you get a lot for your cost. Like, you really do. Like, it's a really nice piece of hardware for the cost when you can compare it to other Wings on the market. And so, yeah, that's my thought there. So this capture thing that we use today will only work in the demo. So first question, would it be of value for us to do this again next week and let it soak in? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely it would be, because, I tell people that are new to it, hey, go through a webinar or through training or whatever you're doing. If you can do it multiple times, I think that's good. And especially Kevin, you asked a lot of questions, and I'm guessing you might be newer to it, and that's great. Yeah, you'll definitely, because next week you'll watch it along and you'll be like, okay, I'm tracking with this. Oh, I didn't catch that. Oh, I had some trouble with this section, et cetera. And you'll be much more smooth with it next week, right? Kevin Miles, so this capture thing, this visualizer capture that we use today will only work in the demo program. So this capture demo that we've got today, yes and no. It basically is a fixed file in that you can't edit it. You can't move the stuff around. You can't change the DMX addresses, et cetera, et cetera. And so technically you could use this demo file with another console or another show file, and with the same lights and control it. So it's not like it's locked down to Onyx, but this particular setup is completely locked down. You can't change anything about it. That's why it's free. But Capture, the visualizer, we mentioned it earlier in the webinar, is a full visualizer program where you can set up virtual stages, have complete custom control of it. And I use it. And like I mentioned, I've been a customer of Capture for about 8 years now, I think. And you can model out your stages and, have that full control to previs and pre-program without your stage at any time. And Capture is licensed in a number of ways. It's pretty cool. You pay by the number of universes. So they have a 1, they have a 2, they have a 4, and then they have an unlimited, and there might be one in between there. Benoit said, which video card are you using to run Capture? So on this computer, this is actually a NVIDIA 1050 Ti. So this computer, it's not like a slamming new video card. I bought this video card 3-4 years ago, and it wasn't top of the line then. Couple things about Capture. So rendering on Capture, I think it is more economical than WYSIWYG, but I'm honestly not sure. But just look at their site, look at the pricing. But video cards for Capture are interesting because it really depends on how many fixtures, how many individual light sources you're going to have on your show, particularly those that cast light that send a beam out. You can turn that off to save on graphics processing. And then also what quality level you want to be able to run at. You don't have to pre-visualize at full quality. It's nice and it's helpful, but it's not required. So I've got a GTX 1050 Ti, GTX 1050 Ti from NVIDIA. And it runs really smooth. One thing I've noticed is that I started with Capture. I bought it like 8 years ago. And so we were in, I don't remember what version, Polar? But either way, maybe older. Since about 2018, in 2019, in the 2020 updates, they've worked hard on their software to make it more efficient. And I've noticed on the same computer with the same files in the past 2 years when I upgrade the software, I get faster speeds out of it and better looking renderings and less use of the graphic card. And so that's a cool thing too, that they're not only, making a visualizer and continuing to add, features and improvements on how it looks, but they also continue to update the efficiency. And as Chuck noted, the advanced courses, guys, on Thursdays with Matthias, I believe, and Chuck, I think, hops in there as well. Unfortunately, I've been super busy and I haven't been able to attend those. But, if anybody has the recordings, hint, you can show me where they are. And I'll check them out. But yeah, they're going into various different topics of the whole software. And so, yeah, that's a good thing to check out as well if you want more info from Obsidian. Cool deal, everybody. Well, we'll wait for any other questions that come in for another minute or two. But again, thank you guys for coming out today. There's still, 6,000 people in this room. And so if there are any more questions, let me know. It's very quiet for 6,000 people. Very quiet. Awesome, folks. Well, that's about the end of the webinar. Thank you guys for hanging out. I think, whoever had questions, we got them answered. And so I appreciate you guys all coming out today. And, like Kevin asked, if you're new to this and you're like, well, that was a lot, we're here for you. We are here and we will we will definitely answer you. Um, yeah, this week we started an hour earlier. There's talk from Matthias of doing an Asian slash Australian time zone uh, time, which would be in the evening instead of the afternoon. If it's now afternoon for you, like it is for me, it would be in the evening. Not sure when that's going to be, but just pay attention to the times when you sign up, and then you'll know what time it is. Thank you guys for hanging out today. It's been great having you. We'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks.